Chapter 931. Seeing that mountain-shaking bear had abandoned Lily, a few disciples hurried forward. Seeing that Lily was still breathing, they didn't dare to neglect her and immediately carried her on their shoulders. After running wildly for a while, they finally exited the Huan ruins and arrived on a flat surface. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. Xiaqing immediately knelt down on the ground and said, "Disciple Xiaqing thanks Senior for saving us on behalf of all the junior sisters." The other disciples also knelt down. Just when they were about to get up and didn't expect any response, a voice came from the distant sky. Everyone was overjoyed. When they looked up, they saw a burly man in a simple robe floating in the distance. Xiaqing was shocked. He was obviously not an elder or leader of the aroma-spreading religion. Could he be a consecrator of some generation? However, Xiaqing immediately denied it. This immortal technique could only be obtained by the leader or the elders. Consecrators couldn't do that. However, looking at this man floating in the sky, she realized that he was even more powerful than the leader. This made Xiaqing scratch her head. "You are all descendants of Ai's old friends. Naturally, I should help you." The man's voice was extremely weak. Xiaqing could only hear him clearly. Before she could say anything, the man waved his hand and flew into the depths of the Huan ruins like the wind. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. The disciples, including Xiaqing, were all dumbfounded. They had heard countless legends of the immortal Tao and revered the deeds of their ancestors. But this immortal Tao divine ability to fly without a trace was something they had never dreamt of even in their wildest dreams. It was Lord Cult Leader. No one dared to think further. Is that senior sister Xia? In the distance, while Xiaqing and the others were stunned, a few male disciples of the Ruijin Palace ran over in surprise. The first one was Ren Wufeng, whom Zhang Xiahua met. Seeing the man in the Taoist robe fly away, Xiaqing and the others were full of surprise and regret. Hearing someone calling them, they calmed down and turned around. As expected, it's senior sister Xia. Ren Wufeng was also pleasantly surprised to see Xiaqing. He looked around and tried to sound her out. Over the past few days, there have been huge changes in Huansu. I was panicking and didn't know what to do. Now that I've seen senior sister, I'm relieved. Xiaqing was non-committal as she nodded and said, "I've made junior brother Ren worry. It's just that the boundary of Huansu seems to have expanded quite a bit." Ren Wufeng cupped his fists and said, "Senior martial sister Xia, you're right. Ever since the first slight tremor in Huansu a few days ago, the edge of Huansu began to expand outwards. I panicked and could only gradually move backwards. The biggest tremor in the middle caused the ruins at the edge of the ruins of waste to be even more dilapidated. The area of expansion was the largest, and the speed was also extremely fast. Even the small ones were almost swept into it. The saber-toothed tigers and other wild beasts inside scared me so much that I broke out in a cold sweat." Ren Wufeng was eloquent and said clearly, "Even the last tremor just now, the area of expansion was also much larger." Xiaqing waved her hand and said, "This matter, have you reported it to sect leader?" "Of course." Ren Wufeng was resolute at first, but then he smiled and said, Although I know that senior martial sister Xia is here and the matter of Huansu should be decided by senior martial sister Xia, it's just that senior martial sister Xia is in Huansu and it's quite inconvenient to send messages, so I took the initiative and sent out the highest level signal on me the day before yesterday. It's just that you've done well." Xiaqing smiled and nodded. She took out a signal from her bosom and handed it over. She said, "Although you've sent out the signal, sect leader might not care about it with the disciples of Emotian Palace around. Send out this signal for me and ask sect leader to come quickly." Yes, Ren Wufeng took it. He knew that Xiaqing and the others must have encountered some unforeseen event, and their inner strength was insufficient, so they let him use it. Seeing Ren Wufeng send out the signal, Xiaqing heaved a sigh of relief and asked in a low voice, "How's junior martial sister Baia's injury?" A disciple next to her whispered, "Junior martial sister Baia's injury is very serious. Not to mention that she has lost an arm. Even the meridians in her body are torn. She needs to recuperate for a while before she can. Well, that's good. As long as she can keep her life, it's a blessing. Feed Baiha another Yuhuandan pill. However, before Xia Qing finished speaking, the disciple next to her continued. It's just that there's a medicinal power in junior martial sister Baiha's body that's nourishing her injury. This medicinal power is very similar to the Yuhuandan pill of our sect, but the medicinal power seems to be much stronger, eh? Xia Qing frowned and stretched out her hand. A wisp of inner strength was transferred into her, and a smile gradually appeared on her face. Yes, this medicinal power is similar to the Yuhuandan pill. It should be from the immortal Dao Senior we saw just now. This also means that the Senior is our incense cult's consecrator. This junior martial sister Baiha must have been saved by him. But that Senior looks not much older than us. A disciple asked. There are countless immortal Dao supernatural powers, and it should be very easy to rejuvenate. That Senior looks like a middle-aged man, but maybe he's older than our sect leader. Xia Qing explained with a smile. Immortal Dao Senior? Middle-aged man? Ren Wufeng was puzzled, but he didn't dare to ask. Junior brother Ren, do you have horses and carriages here? Xia Qing turned her head and asked. Of course, Senior Martial Sister Xia. Do you want to use them? I'll go and prepare them now. Ren Wufeng cupped his hands and left. In less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, she led the disciples of Ruijin Palace back with a few horses and a carriage. Looking at her junior sisters putting the Baiha into the carriage, Xia Qing instructed, Junior brother Ren, there's a huge change in Huan Su. Although we've already sent out a signal, Lord Cult Master is busy every day and might not have the time to come over. We still need to report to Lingering Fragrance Peak. We are all injured. Send a few disciples to follow us back to the mountain. Yes. Ren Wufeng swiftly arranged everything. With a few disciples of the Sharp Gold Hall leading the way, the group was about to leave the Huan ruins. At this moment, an odd beast darted out from behind a huge rock not far away. It slanted around the crowd and headed towards the edge of the ruins of Huan. This. Xia Qing looked at the familiar David's deer and couldn't help but ask, This? Is it the David's deer? Seeing this, Ren Wufeng said curiously, Yes. Just a few days ago, a person who claimed to be the disciple of Mo Xian Gong of Lingering Fragrance Peak entered the ruins of Huan Su. He said that he was sent by Lord Cult Master to pick up Senior Sister Xia. This odd beast was left behind by that disciple. Disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak? Xia Qing frowned. Is he called Ren Xiaoyao? Yes, it's Ren Xiaoyao. Ren Wufeng was surprised. Could it be that this Ren Xiaoyao isn't the disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak? That's right. He's the disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak, personally appointed by Lord Cult Master. Didn't you check his waist token? No, of course I did. But it's my first time seeing this disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak. So? Ren Wufeng nodded and then realized. Could it be that Senior Sister Xia didn't meet him? I thought Senior Sister Xia had seen him, and he's already. Xia Qing waved her hand. I haven't seen him yet. We're all at the core of the ruins of Huan Su. How can Ren Xiaoyao enter? Unless Lord Cult Master tells him the route. Then, looking at the back of the David's deer, she shook her head and said, Not to mention that Lord Cult Master won't tell him the route, even if he did, now. Unless God opens his eyes, otherwise, it's impossible for him to survive. Just when Xia Qing came to a conclusion, God really opened his eyes. The David's deer ran to the edge of the ruins of Huan Su and stopped at a distance, as if it was extremely scared. In the ruins in front of it, the shadow of a saber-toothed tiger loomed, and then a thin and tall figure flew out. With a bang, it crashed into a mountain rock not far away, and there was no movement for a long time. Xia Qing was dumbfounded. She had seen Zhang Xiaohua before. Although she didn't have a deep impression of him, she still knew about his thin and tall figure and his reputation of breaking into Lingering Fragrance Peak. She had just mentioned him, and he actually escaped from the ruins of Huan Su. Junior brother Ren, go over and take a look. See if Ren Xiaoyao is still alive? Ren Wufeng urged the horse. Halfway through, he saw Zhang Xiaohua standing up unsteadily and looking around blankly. When he saw Ren Wufeng, His face was filled with joy, and he walked unsteadily towards Ren Wufeng's direction. The David's deer was Huan Huan. It cried out happily and rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua got onto the David's deer with great difficulty and then urged Huan Huan to come in front of Ren Wufeng. Leaning on Huan Huan's back, she said weakly, "Junior brother Ren." Ren Wufeng confirmed Zhang Xiaohua's identity as a disciple of the guardian. He didn't dare to neglect and said with a smile, "Senior brother Ren, please come over here." Senior sister Xia from Mo Nonggong is returning to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Returning to Lingering Fragrance Peak? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. It's over? She's going back just like that? I don't know. You'd better ask senior sister Xia. Ren Wufeng shook his head. When he was in front of Xia Qing, Zhang Xiaohua struggled to get off the David's deer. Xia Qing frowned and said angrily, "No need. Ren Xiaoyao, you're injured now. It's better for you to sit on the horse." "Thank you, senior sister Xia," Zhang Xiaohua said with a grin. "Ren Xiaoyao, why are you here? Aren't you accompanying Zixia at Lingering Fragrance Peak? Why did Lord Cult Leader ask you to come here? Why did you run into the ruins of Huan by yourself? Did Lord Cult Leader let you in?" Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to speak, Xia Qing threw a bunch of questions at him. Zhang Xiaohua had already prepared his words. When Xia Qing's voice fell, he answered leisurely, "I'm here on Lord Cult Leader's orders to come to the ruins of Huan to fetch senior sister Xia. Of course, I'm indebted to Lord Cult Leader's kindness and didn't force me to go in and explore, but I thought that since I'm already a disciple of the guardian of Mo Nonggong, I should be able to enter the ruins of Huan. Wouldn't it be better if I could help senior sister Xia inside?" So you acted on your own initiative and entered the ruins of Huan? Xia Qing asked angrily. -4. Chapter 932. Yes? Zhang Xiaohua said curiously, "But I didn't expect it to be so quiet inside. I didn't run into any of the monsters junior brother Ren Wufeng mentioned until a few days ago. I went to a place, and before I could investigate in detail, the ground shook. Then, I saw some strange things that were different from the monsters junior brother Ren Wufeng mentioned. Hee, my martial arts are limited. I can't compare with senior sister Xia. So I gave up the idea of going forward and went back the way I came. But it was a quiet ruin a few days ago. I don't know what happened, but it suddenly became lively. If I didn't have the strength to run fast, I would have been eaten by those beasts. TSK, I don't know what those monsters saw in me. I don't have much meat on me. What's so delicious about me?" Zhang Xiaohua shook his head. His words made the female disciples of Mo Xian Palace cover their mouths. Only Xia Qing frowned. When she met Zhang Xiaohua in the fragrant cult, she was cold and didn't like him. When she heard about the matter between Zhang Xiaohua and Nye Qinyu, she thought that Zhang Xiaohua saved Nye Qinyu in order to enter the fragrant cult. Later, when she heard that Zhang Xiaohua broke into the Lingxiang Peak and got along with Zixia, she felt more and more ashamed of Zhang Xiaohua's character. Now that she heard Zhang Xiaohua's glib tongue, she was disgusted. She didn't want to ask about his encounter in the ruins of Huanyu and just sneered. "It seems that junior brother Ren is quite lucky. I don't know what he encountered in there and what benefits he got. However, just by seeing junior brother Ren being chased by the saber-toothed tiger, it's not something to be proud of." Well, Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and smiled. "I met." Xia Qing waved her hand and stopped him. Junior fellow apprentice Ran is the protector disciple of Mo Xian Gong, which is the direct subordinate of Hierarch Darren. Although his position is not high, it is not something I can ask. Since Hierarch Darren sent you to meet him, you should report everything to Hierarch Darren in detail after meeting him. Then, without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua's reply, she waved her hand and said, "Let's go ahead. You stay behind." Yes. Zhang Xiaohua was a little confused. Xia Qing was an old acquaintance of hers outside the incense cult. It was because of this relationship that she saved her several times in the Huan Su. Although she didn't ask for her gratitude, she didn't need to be so cold. After everyone moved forward, Zhang Xiaohua leaned over the back of the David's deer and slowly followed behind. Thinking about Xia Qing's respect and pleading to her in the Huan Su, a senior of the Immortal Path whom she had never met, Zhang Xiaohua understood. Although her heart was firm, her nature hadn't changed at all. The pride in her heart overflowed even in front of the weak. Was this kind of person suitable to cultivate the immortal path? Zhang Xiaohua didn't know this question and was too lazy to think about it. He just thought about it and threw it to the back of his mind. He began to think about how to deal with Nanjing Yi. Although Zhang Xiaohua used the transfiguration technique to transform himself into Wan Wuxin and deceive Xiaqing and the others, he couldn't guarantee that he could deceive Nanjing Yi. He followed Xiaqing and the others into the Huan Su. Now that such a big change had happened in the Huan Su, he would definitely be suspected by Nanjing Yi. Since he was the initiator of this change, how could he not be nervous? Moreover, he was full of the secrets of the immortal path. If Nanjing Yi discovered even a little bit of it, but they were all life-threatening. Although Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation had improved greatly in the restriction at the core of the Huan Su, he was like a baby who had a mountain of gold and didn't know how to spend it. Although his vital energy was sufficient and his divine sense was comparable to Nanjing Yi's, when he thought about how Nanjing Yi could easily stop Shimujuan's shocking sword with her divine sense, Zhang Xiaohua was quite nervous. He knew very well that he definitely didn't have that kind of cultivation. Xiaqing and the rest were all injured, so their movements were not very fast. They slowly urged the horses under them to move and adjust their breathing on the back of the horses. When they were far away from Huan Su and saw the sky, it was already gradually getting dark. It wasn't until everyone set up camp and rested on a relatively flat ground that Zhang Xiaohua racked his brains and thought of a stupid idea. That was to take out all the Dharma artifacts related to the immortal path, find a place, and bury them. He didn't have a single Dharma artifact on him. Let's see what Nanjing Yi could find. Zhang Xiaohua was the guardian disciple of Imo Nenggong. Of course, he wouldn't stay with the disciples of Ruijin Palace. Xiaqing and the others were female disciples, so they couldn't stay with Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua's tent was set up alone beside a mountain rock. Looking at the night sky, the injured female disciples stayed in the tent to adjust their breathing. The disciples of Ruijin Palace lit a bonfire in the distance and patrolled. Zhang Xiaohua scanned with her divine sense and directly went underground. After walking for a short distance, she found a place to hide. She took out all the things on her body, chasing dream, belt, bracelet, money pouch, and so on, and hid them all. Then, she set up a restriction to prevent them from being discovered. At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua secretly prayed in her heart, "May the passing gods bless me. These are all this little one's belongings. Please don't let anyone discover them." After everything was done, Zhang Xiaohua was about to leave. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat as she remembered the bracelet on her arm. This was her biggest secret. Should she hide this bracelet as well? Taking off the bracelet from her arm, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the thing that she had long ignored. It was made of a dark material, and she seemed to be able to see the faint starlight inside. She scanned it with her divine sense, but there wasn't any fluctuation of heaven and earth yuan qi. When she used her divine sense to invade it, she didn't find any abnormalities. It was no different from an ordinary object. Let's take a gamble. My divine sense can't discover this thing. Maybe Abish Jingyi can't see it either? Zhang Xiaohua comforted herself. After all, this was her most precious thing. She didn't feel at ease leaving it somewhere else. I forgot. Previously, when Senior Wan Wuxin taught me how to refine the stone tablet, she mentioned the origin energy. At that time, I couldn't spit it out. Now that my cultivation has improved, I feel that it's possible. Should I refine the stone tablet? I should also see what's inside. If this place is discovered by others in the future, won't I not even know what's inside? After making up her mind, Zhang Xiaohua put the bracelet on her arm and took the jade tablet out of her belt. She looked around and scanned with her divine sense. She found a small cave in the distance. She made a hand seal and flew over. Zhang Xiaohua sat down cross-legged. She stretched out her palm and placed it on the stone tablet that had turned light gold. She silently recited the method to refine the stone tablet. She refined the stone tablet once more. Everything happened naturally. According to Wan Wuxin's instructions, Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of hazy light gold origin energy. It scattered on the stone tablet. Instantly, The stone tablet flashed with a sparkling light. A feeling of freedom came from the stone tablet. At the same time, a voice sounded again. Fellow Taoist, with your cultivation, this stone tablet can be considered to have been refined by you. Fellow Taoist, you've come from afar, so I invited you in because I had no other choice. Perhaps it wasn't your intention. However, this stone tablet was obtained by I from the Heaven Play 5 Elements formation. Although the things inside are precious, they're different from what I learned. It's fate that I'm giving it to you now. Fellow Taoist, please don't be in a hurry to comprehend it. Just take a look first. It won't be too late to comprehend it when you have the opportunity in the future. Please come in and have a chat. Then, the voice disappeared without a trace. Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua laughed secretly. Isn't that Wan Wuxin's voice? And judging from the meaning of that voice, it was mine before I entered the passageway. This Wan Wuxin is really scheming. First, he left his voice in the stone tablet and let me see the things inside the stone tablet so that I'm tempted. Then, he let me enter the passageway. But who knew that I don't have the ability to refine this stone tablet at all? Of course, I don't know anything about the things inside. But what good things are left in the stone tablet? Even Wan Wuxin, the founder of the immortal Tao, said that it's precious? Zhang Xiaohua's curiosity was greatly aroused. She penetrated her divine sense into the stone tablet. She saw that the stone tablet was also an empty place. She couldn't see anything. Could it be that Senior Huan is lying? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled, a transparent human figure suddenly appeared in the empty space of the stone tablet. That human figure waved his hand, and a small sword flew out from his hand. Once the small sword entered the air, it multiplied from 1 to 10, then from 10 to 100, and from 100 to 1,000. In the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with sword light dancing. Could it be that there were already more than 10,000 of them? At the same time, a flow flowed into Zhang Xiaohua's mind. When Zhang Xiaohua digested the flow, she couldn't help but be overjoyed. This flow recorded the technique of controlling the sword. It was called sword rendition of the world, and this illusory sword technique was only the first level of the sword technique. Who knew how many levels there were after that? How could this not make Zhang Xiaohua ecstatic? His own driving of Chasing Dream was merely based on a few nameless flying sword moves. Based on his own exploration, it was basically a wild fox meditation. It was fine for him to bully martial artists normally, but if he met someone with superior martial arts, he would be helpless. It was simply impossible for him to have the magical power of 10,000 swords in the metal element formation. And this sword rendition of the world, although the name was as vulgar as weapon rendition of the world, the content inside could not be mentioned in the same breath. The realm of 10,000 swords that Zhang Xiaohua dreamed of was only the first level of the sword technique. It was no wonder that even Wan Wuxin praised it as precious. After Zhang Xiaohua penetrated her divine sense into the stone tablet, she carefully looked at the technique of the transparent human figure several times. After she was sure that she had memorized it, Zhang Xiaohua reluctantly put the stone tablet into her belt and put it into the restriction again. However, this time, although Zhang Xiaohua was separated by the restriction, she could still feel the position of the stone tablet. It was as if she could see it herself. Good, Zhang Xiaohua praised in her heart. So refining the stone tablet has such benefits? I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to find this place. -4. Chapter 933. When Zhang Xiaohua sensed the stone steel's location and was about to leave, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He seemed to have sensed something, but after thinking about it, he couldn't figure out what it was. Could it be another warning sign? Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. He burrowed into the ground and headed back. When he saw the bonfire in the Ruijin Hall, he suddenly realized something. I was wondering why it was so strange. It seems like I only sensed the stone tablet's location, but I didn't sense any fluctuations from the stone tablet. This is the consequence of refining the stone tablet? Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed, but he couldn't make up his mind. After all, he was the one who refined the stone tablet. It wasn't strange for him to be able to sense the stone tablet without using the energy fluctuations. However, He didn't know if others, such as Nanjing Yi, would be able to sense the stone tablet's fluctuations with their divine senses. This isn't easy to try. Zhang Xiaohua was a little depressed. It would be best if I could conceal it. If I can't, wouldn't I be losing money? Moreover, the refining method of each artifact is different. The method of refining the stone tablet probably won't work on other artifacts. It's better to get past Nanjingyi first. It was a quiet night. Zhang Xiaohua calmly comprehended the first stage of the Sword of the World. The chant matched with the human figure in the stone tablet. After tasting it, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but scratch his ears and cheeks. He just wanted to follow the instructions of the technique and control chasing dream. He wanted to create thousands of sword shadows in the air. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua escaped from the tent and found a secluded place to practice the Big Dipper Divine Fist. The Big Dipper Divine Fist actually increased by 3 stages, which made Zhang Xiaohua very happy. Then, Zhang Xiaohua thought of using the Illusion Breaker Eyes to look at his tempered bones. It was a pity that the Illusion Breaker Eyes had absorbed the power of the lightning and was resting. No matter how Zhang Xiaohua tried to activate the core in his Naiwan Palace, it didn't respond. Haha, the fragrant religion is truly my blessed land. I've gained a lot in the Yulong Grand Canyon, and my cultivation has also increased in the ruins of Huan. Although I didn't get the Earth's core, but I don't have any regrets. After all, on the lingering fragrance peak, I met the dream that I looked forward to the most. Zhang Xiaohua's heart was filled with joy. When he returned to the tent, he bumped into the disciples of the Ruijin Palace Hall. This ordinary action made the disciples of the Ruijin Palace feel flattered and flattered. Xia Qing curled her lips and despised him even more. Everyone set off, and after traveling for another half a day, they arrived at a dangerous place. Between the crevices of 2 tall mountains, there was a gurgling stream. On the left side of the stream, there was a winding path that passed through the foot of the mountain. When Zhang Xiaohua passed through here that day, he had killed Qimujuan. He was amazed at the cruelty of the battle of the immortal Dao and didn't pay attention to the dangers of the terrain. Now that his cultivation had improved greatly, the range of his divine sense had also increased greatly. Therefore, before he got close to the winding path, he was shocked. When he released his divine sense, although he couldn't see the foot of the mountain clearly, a person hiding in the green grass in the stream caught his attention. Io, who is setting up this ambush? Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. As far as he knew, other than Lord Jingzha's side, there was only the Tenryu sect. He had seen these 2 groups of people. As for the other sects, such as the Dalan Temple and the Righteous Alliance, Zhang Xiaohua didn't think that they were obedient and wouldn't send people to infiltrate the fragrant religion. Could it be that this group of people is together with the 2 people we met in Huansu? As Zhang Xiaohua thought, he followed behind the group and walked forward slowly. He was still leaning over the David's deer, his divine sense probing forward from time to time, hoping to see more. As expected, before they arrived at the tall mountain, Zhang Xiaohua had already discovered a few people on the cliff. Those people were also quietly lying on the ground. There were dozens of huge rocks in front of them. Looking at their posture, it was similar to the attack of the giant ape in the Yulong Grand Canyon. Zhang Xiaohua looked at his divine sense anxiously. He really didn't know how to warn Xiaqing and the rest. Suddenly, a sense of danger rose in his heart. A familiar divine sense spread out in front of him. Abyss Jing Yi. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and immediately retracted his divine sense. He silently used the nameless incantation to conceal his cultivation and divine sense, but it was still the same as before. Although Zhang Xiaohua retracted his divine sense, his eyes were still half open, slightly slanting to look at the tall mountain. After a while, he didn't see any movement at the top of the mountain, but Xiaqing and the rest walked to the bottom of the cliff. At this moment, the person who was leaning over the grass leaped out. With a wave of his left arm, a black light was flung out from his arm, directly shooting towards the disciples of the Sharp Gold Palace who were caught off guard. At the same time, the human figures on the tall mountain also straightened up, forming groups of a few people. They put their hands on the huge rocks and shouted in unison, wanting to push the huge rocks down. However, before they could exert enough strength, they saw a figure suddenly rise from an inconceivable place, leaping high and landing on the huge rocks in front of them. Ah! The few people were shocked. When they looked carefully, it was a white-haired old woman wearing a palace robe. Run! One of them was very clever. When the others were still thinking about how this person appeared, he had already retreated, shouted loudly, and turned around to flee to the side. When the person fled, the rest of the people also came to their senses. At this time, how could they guess how this person came up or who she was? As a result, all of them scattered like monkeys when the tree falls, fleeing in all directions. The old woman in the palace robe wasn't in a hurry. With a wave of her hand, a small sword broke through the air, piercing towards the back of one of the people's neck at lightning speed. That person's martial arts was also very strong. When he heard the sound of wind behind him, he didn't turn his head. Instead, he raised his hand, and the short sword in his hand struck towards the small sword. However, there was a loophole in the attack. Before the short sword hit, the small sword suddenly rose up and pierced the back of the person's head. Moreover, as the old woman in the palace robe moved her finger slightly, the small sword was pulled out from the back of the person's head, and with a whoosh, it attacked another person in another direction. Under the mysterious means of the old woman in the palace robe, the few people on the top of the mountain turned into vengeful spirits in just a moment. The old woman moved her finger again, and the small sword flew back from the back of the last person's neck. The end of the small sword was connected to the old woman's finger by a very thin, transparent silk thread. At the bottom of the mountain, although the ambushers came prepared, they appeared from the water after all. The sound first alarmed the disciples of the Ruijin Palace. Although they were caught off guard, they still managed to dodge the attack in a hurry and only suffered a slight injury. The ambushers originally wanted to attract everyone's attention. Seeing that the ambush failed, they only exchanged a few blows with the disciples of the Ruijin Palace. They didn't see any boulders falling from the mountain, so they knew that things had changed. Therefore, they didn't continue to fight and turned to escape. As for Zhang Xiaohua, she stole a glance at everything on the mountain. When she saw Nun Jingyi driving the flying sword and using the small sword to kill the enemy, which was similar to the method she used previously, she couldn't help but feel relieved. She felt that although Nun Jingyi was skillful in using her divine sense, which was the secret technique of the incense cult, in the way of controlling the sword, it seemed that she wasn't much better than her. The flying sword was abnormally fast, but it didn't have any moves to speak of, and it didn't transform into any sword light. Nun Jingyi killed the enemy very quickly. By the time the person who ambushed her ran away, she had already floated down from the cliff. Nun Jingyi's figure was mysterious. Like a dancing white lotus, she floated lightly in the air and gradually slid down. In everyone's eyes, wasn't she a falling fairy? Had she already left the realm of martial arts? Sect leader? The disciples of the Ruijin Palace, Xiaqing, and the others were shocked. They hurriedly dismounted from their horses and stood respectfully on the ground. Behind Xiaqing and the others, the ambushers turned and fled in the direction of Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua stole a glance at the falling figure of Nun Jingyi and couldn't help but sigh. They're both using the levitation technique. But why is the incense cult's technique so beautiful? I learned the levitation technique from the Misty school. Not to mention the levitation technique, even the imperial wind technique doesn't seem to be as beautiful as her figure. Zhang Xiaohua could already tell that Nun Jingyi was using the levitation technique. However, she actually dared to use the levitation technique to jump down from such a high cliff. This was beyond Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. Back then, Zhang Xiaohua only dared to show off her ability after learning the imperial wind technique. While she was thinking, the ambusher had already rushed to the front of Zhang Xiaohua's David's deer. Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. She felt that Nun Jingyi's divine sense had already arrived. If she didn't make a move, she would definitely be seen by her. Hence, she stretched out her hand and picked up the great wisdom sword from Huanhuan's back. She lifted her right hand and swung it at the head of the ambusher. That ambusher had also seen Zhang Xiaohua, who was left alone. However, when he saw that she was injured, he didn't put her in his eyes. His purpose was to attract attention. So he let go of Zhang Xiaohua and directly attacked the disciples of the Ruijin Palace. At this moment, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua weakly swinging a sword embryo at him, he raised his sword in disdain and wanted to block it. However, when their weapons collided, an unparalleled force attacked him. Before he could circulate his energy, he felt a pain in his hand. The webbing between his thumb and index finger had already split open. His sword was also shattered. His chest was also shaken, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. That person was horrified. This person who seemed to be injured was actually a great expert who was even more brilliant than the disciples of the Ruijin Palace. However, at this moment, the sword embryo that was incomparably heavy in the eyes of that person was once again in Zhang Xiaohua's hand. She swung it like a lamp and smashed it towards that person's chest again. Ren Xiaoyao, spare his life. Not far away, Nun Jingyi's voice sounded. At the same time, a divine sense also approached from afar like a python and wrapped around Zhang Xiaohua's great wisdom heavy sword. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to release her divine sense, but she could still feel Nun Jingyi's divine sense on her arm. Although the force was not great, it still surprised Zhang Xiaohua once again. Isn't divine sense unable to move ordinary weapons? Even my divine sense can't enter the great wisdom heavy sword. How did Nun Jingyi do it? -4. Chapter 934. Nun Jingyi's spiritual sense wasn't strong, and Zhang Xiaohua could easily neutralize it. However, how could he disobey Lord Sect Leader's orders? Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to retrieve the great wisdom sword. At this moment, the disciples of the Sharp Golden Hall who were chasing after the sneak attacker arrived. However, just as Zhang Xiaohua placed the great wisdom sword on Huanhuan's back, the sneak attacker who was lying on the ground looked at Nun Jingyi who was flying down from afar and the disciples of the Sharp Golden Hall who were close by. He sneered and clenched his teeth without leaving a trace. In an instant, a stream of black blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. His body tilted and fell to the ground weakly. Nun Jingyi's spiritual sense left Zhang Xiaohua's great wisdom sword and scanned the surroundings before withdrawing. When the disciples of the Sharp Golden Hall picked up the sneak attacker from the ground, he was already dead. The disciples of the Sharp Golden Hall had no choice but to bring the corpse to Xia Qing and the others. When Nun Jingyi landed from the sky, Zhang Xiaohua, who was at the back of the group, also rushed to the front. He followed Xia Qing and the others to pay respects to Lord Sect Leader. Nun Jingyi waved her hand and asked, Xia Qing, is there any change in the Huan ruins? Why did you send out the emergency signal again and again? Xia Qing didn't dare to delay and quickly told her about the changes in the Huan ruins. Before Xia Qing could finish, Nun Jingyi's expression changed drastically and she said, all of you, rest here. We will talk after I go to the Huan ruins. After speaking, she floated up and used the levitation technique to head to the Huan ruins. Reporting to Lord Sect Leader, this disciple is willing to accompany Lord Sect Leader. Xia Qing stood up and shouted. Nun Jingyi said impatiently, all of you are seriously injured. You should rest here and recuperate. There is no need to follow me. We will talk after I return. As he spoke, he no longer paid any attention to the crowd. His figure floated up and headed in the direction of Huan Su. Looking at Nun Jingyi floating in the air like an immortal, Xia Qing and the others were full of admiration. However, Zhang Xiaohua criticized her in his heart. She's just Hee. The great change in Huan Su is the most important thing for Lord Hierarch. If she wants to rush to Huan Su, she'll naturally use the method she's best at. Martial Dao's lightness skill is not her first choice. It seems that the levitation skill is Nun Jingyi's ultimate lightness skill. Ever since Zhang Xiaohua saw Nun Jingyi's powerful spiritual sense and her exquisite control over it, she felt inferior. However, when she saw Nun Jingyi only knew the levitation technique, she didn't know how to fly, she felt. She didn't know how she could flying technique. S was right. Seeing Lord Sect Leader leave in a hurry, Xia Qing and the others followed Lord Sect Leader's orders and prepared to rest. Of course, this was a dangerous place. Although some of the ambushing enemies had been easily killed by Nun Jingyi, there was no guarantee that there would be a second wave. Therefore, everyone still retreated a distance and waited for Nun Jingyi's return. At this time, far away from the fragrant religion, In a beautiful mountain villa, there were a dozen people sitting in a hall. In front of each person was a table filled with fine wine and delicacies. In front of the hall was a spacious space, and there were another dozen or so beautiful dancers. They danced gracefully, and the sound of bamboo instruments could be heard all around. It was a beautiful scene. When the music ended, the dancers stopped. A handsome man in his 50s with dark hair and a handsome face laughed loudly. He waved his hand, and the dancers retreated. Even the musicians left quietly. The hall was silent. The man picked up the wine cup on the table, stood up, and said, "Longting Villa hasn't been so lively for a long time. It's an honor to have all of you here. Now that the singing and dancing have stopped, let's take a break. Come, let me propose a toast to all of you." The other 10 people also raised their cups and said, "How can we not come when Villa Lord Long summoned us? Come, come, come. We also respect Villa Lord Long." As they spoke, they all drank the wine in their cups. Then, a group of disciples in brocade clothes came up from the side. They held pots in their hands and filled everyone's cups. Then, they silently retreated to the back. Then, an old man in purple clothes, who was sitting not far away, also stood up. He held his wine cup and said with a smile, "Although there are many disputes in the southern Walline, generally speaking, we live in harmony. Villa Lord Long has put a lot of effort into this. Now, more than 10 sect leaders and leaders have gathered together. It's not easy. This old man is not talented, but on behalf of all the sects, I propose a toast to Villa Lord Long." Very good. The people around him clapped their hands. Villa Lord Long stood up with a smile and also raised his cup. He said, "The singing and dancing are all because of the efforts of all of you. Longting Villa is just doing its duty. How can we have other forces? The Moon Sea sect is the real power in the southern Wuling. Sect leader Su is too modest. Come, let's drink together." The people around him laughed and said, "Let's drink together, let's drink together." Then, they raised their cups and drank the wine together. Afterward, the guests and the host drank and chatted happily. When they were drunk, Manor Master Long put down his cup and sighed. He said, "Actually, I wanted to invite all of you to have a chat. It's just that Sai, sect leader Su of the Moon Sea sect, said curiously, 'Villa Lord Long, did something happen to you? If there's anything you need us to do, just tell us.'" The others also stopped drinking and listened to Villa Lord Long's explanation. Unexpectedly, Villa Lord Long shook his head and said with a smile, "Didn't I just say that the southern Wuling works together? How can there be anything that my Longting Villa can't deal with? It's just that. Cough, cough, forget it. It's all in the past. Come, everyone, let's drink." Villa Lord Long raised his cup and wanted to persuade them to drink, but sect leader Su didn't listen and said with a frown, "Villa Lord Long, I'm older than you, and I want to talk to you. Since you have something on your mind, why don't you say it? Even if we can't help you, maybe we can give you an idea." Everyone in the room laughed and said, "That's right. Villa Lord Long, you don't treat us as friends anymore." "Not at all, not at all." Villa Lord Long laughed. "There's nothing difficult. I just thought of some trivial things in the past. If it weren't for those annoying things, we would have been drinking and chatting happily. Come, let's drink this cup and talk later." Okay. Everyone raised their cups. After that, Manor Master Long put down his wine cup and said with an ashamed expression, "Actually, everyone knows about this matter. I didn't hide it from everyone. A long time ago, my son went to Rejuvenation Valley to ask for her hand in marriage. However, he was defeated by an unknown boy. Ha ha ha." Sect leader Su laughed and waved his hand. "I was wondering what happened. So it's such a small matter. At that time, my Moon Sea sect also had a few young and handsome men. They went there energetically, but they also returned in defeat. It's nothing, heh." Manor Master Long chuckled. "Sect Master Su is magnanimous. You already have many children and grandchildren, so of course you don't care about these things. However, my unfilial son is dispirited after this blow. He even sent people to inquire about Rejuvenation Valley." At this time, a person next to him also interrupted. "Young Master Long is indeed an infatuated person. Villa Lord Long is so lucky. Villa Lord Long almost rolled his eyes. He didn't know what his son's infatuation had to do with his good fortune as a father, but he only smiled. Sect leader Zhou must be joking. Rejuvenation Valley's third miss already has a husband, but my son is still thinking about her. It's really inappropriate. The other person thought for a long time, but still said, if Villa Lord Long didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. Back then, my unfilial son also went there full of expectations. However, before he could enter the arena, he ran into Brother Zhou's son. In the end, the two of them sparred in private and injured each other. Neither of them went up. Haha, that's right. Brother Yuan is right. The man from before also laughed. However, even if our two brats went up the arena, they wouldn't be able to withstand 3 moves from young Master Long. When this was said, sect leader Su of Moon Sea Sect frowned. I heard that Dragon Fifth was also knocked out of the arena by that unknown brat in 3 moves. I just don't know who that unknown brat is. Rejuvenation Valley's Commander Nye didn't announce it in the Jianghu. That's right, not only did he not announce it, but sect leader Su also doesn't know. He didn't even hold a wedding. Why is that? Sect leader Su was stunned. The martial arts competition for a spouse is over. Why didn't they hold a wedding? Commander Nye is really muddle-headed. At this time, Villa Lord Long shook his head. Sect leader Su still doesn't care enough about the affairs of the Jianghu. Rejuvenation Valley didn't hold a wedding. After the martial arts competition for a spouse, his son-in-law didn't even show his face. He didn't even attend the banquet afterwards. Isn't this looking down on the handsome martial artists who went to the martial arts competition for a spouse? More than that, Villa Lord Long added oil to the fire. Commander Nye only said that the martial arts competition for a spouse was over. Rejuvenation Valley's third young miss is still young, and that unknown brat is also young and not suitable for marriage, so he threw this matter aside. He didn't know that his careless decision not only hurt the hearts of many young people like my son, but also damaged the reputation of the southern Jianghu. Those handsome martial artists who came from afar, who didn't say that our southern Jianghu is untrustworthy. Sect leader Su was somewhat displeased and shouted. These years, Rejuvenation Valley relied on the fragrance cult as their backing and didn't follow the morals of the Jianghu in many things. They owe us a lot in terms of etiquette. Right, this time, the fragrance cult said that they wouldn't pay attention to Rejuvenation Valley for 10 years. Is it because they know some of Rejuvenation Valley's evil deeds? To teach Rejuvenation Valley a lesson? Villa Lord Long clapped his hands and said, Sect leader Su is indeed perceptive. That's exactly the case. Think about it, just a martial arts competition for a spouse has caused so much trouble for us. Who knows how many disgusting things have happened before? The fragrance cult's punishment is a warning to Rejuvenation Valley. It really should be. A few years ago, this old man had something to ask of Rejuvenation Valley. I wanted to ask for a medicinal pill, but Commander Nye flatly refused. This really made this old man lose face. At this point, sect leader Zhou of the Flying Fish Gang probed, Villa Lord Long, do you think the fragrance cult will really ignore Rejuvenation Valley for 10 years? -4. Chapter 935. Of course, Long Zhuangji said in a serious tone, the fragrant religion has a lot of face. How can they go back on their words? Even if someone destroys Rejuvenation Valley, the fragrant cult won't say a word. Hearing this, a few people had strange expressions. However, they didn't say anything. They only looked at each other and exchanged glances. One of them smiled and said, Rejuvenation Valley has worked with the fragrant cult for so many years. There should be some feelings between them. Who would really go against the Rejuvenation Valley? That's not right. Manor Master Long shook his head. It's just a partnership. If Valley Master Peng's Frozen Ice Garden can get in touch with the fragrant cult, they can also replace Rejuvenation Valley. Can your frigid ice garden also cultivate medicinal herbs and send out medicine boys? Yes, not only Valley Master Pong, but Valley Master Yin and Sect Master Zhang also have this opportunity. Of course, this is under the condition that Rejuvenation Valley can no longer work with the fragrant cult. Manor Master Long's voice was low. He then raised his cup and said, "Come, let's not talk so much. It's not easy for us to gather here. Let's drink." Haha, come, Manor Master Long. Although everyone had their own thoughts, they all smiled and raised their cups to toast. After a few rounds of drinking, they talked about some interesting things in the martial world. Unknowingly, the topic turned to Rejuvenation Valley and the martial arts competition before the new year. At this time, Sect Master Zhou of the Flying Fish Sect thought for a moment. He looked at Sect Master Yuan of the Raging Wave Sect and said, "Actually, there's something I don't know if I should say. Brother Zhou, that's not right. What's wrong? Actually, I won't hide it from everyone. Just now, Brother Yuan also said that my son and Brother Zhou's son also went to the martial competition to find a spouse. When he came back, he told me something. I feel that this Rejuvenation Valley's martial competition for a spouse has a lot of filthy aspects. Perhaps it is purely a scam, and Commander Nye is just playing to the gallery to make Rejuvenation Valley famous? Manor Master Long and Sect Master Su were also very interested. There was no need to mention the others. They all asked, is there a reason behind this? Seeing that everyone was paying attention, gang leader Zhou couldn't help but feel a little nervous, as if he regretted saying it. He smiled and said, "Actually, Brother Yuan also knows about this. Don't you think so, Brother Yuan?" Well, when Sect Leader Zhou of Flying Fish Sect mentioned him, Sect Leader Yuan of Raging Wave Sect frowned and said with a smile, "My son came back from Rejuvenation Valley and told me many things. I wonder which one Brother Zhou is talking about?" Gang Leader Zhou felt a bit helpless when Gang Leader Yuan pushed the topic to him. However, he looked at Manor Master Long and Cult Leader Su, who were sitting at the head of the table. He licked his lips and said, "It's just a child's speculation. If what we say is different from the truth, won't Rejuvenation Valley bear a grudge against us?" Ha ha ha, Manor Master Long laughed loudly. "You worry too much, Gang Leader Zhou. Not to mention that everyone here is on good terms with the martial arts world in the South. They definitely won't say what you said. Yes, even if there are some things, they definitely won't say it was you who said it. Moreover, Brother Zhou, even if you don't say it, do you think there's a wall in this world that doesn't have a crack?" Manor Master Long chuckled and said, "Moreover, Brother Zhou, do you think Rejuvenation Valley still has the mind to worry about other things at this time? I'm afraid that the order from the Cult of Fragrance has already thrown them into a panic." After listening to Manor Master Long's explanation, Gang Leader Zhou's mood was greatly relieved. He said with a smile, "After all, Rejuvenation Valley has been like a fox pretending to be a tiger for so long. I have no choice but to be cautious. Everyone, please forgive me. Come, I'll punish myself with a cup." As he said this, he raised his cup and drank it in one gulp. Then, he told them about how Zhou Tao and Yuan Guiyun had met Zhang Xiaohua and Ye Qinyu. Finally, he added, "Everyone, you see, it's been a long time since the martial arts competition for a spouse. This third miss of Rejuvenation Valley is still playing with this Ren Xiaoyao. She doesn't take the martial arts competition for a spouse seriously at all. Moreover, at the end of the martial arts competition for a spouse, that Ren Xiaoyao clearly doesn't have any qualifications, but Old Man Yu and Old Man Ye actually led him onto the stage. It's obvious that this is a trap. No one would believe it if they hadn't already done something." As soon as he said this, the crowd was in an uproar. Manor Master Long's expression didn't change. He turned his head and asked, "Gang Leader Yuan, is what Gang Leader Zhou said true?" Gang Leader Yuan of the Raging Wave Gang said with a wry smile, "My son also said the same thing when he went back. I felt that this was a serious matter, so I didn't dare to make any mistakes. It wasn't until today that I dared to tell Gang Leader Zhou, Rejuvenation Valley has gone too far." Behind him, Valley Master Peng slammed the table and stood up. He said angrily, "Before the new year, my Cold Ice Garden also had disciples who went. They really sincerely admired the reputation of Rejuvenation Valley's third miss. But Marshal Nye actually treated us like this." That's right. The people behind him also echoed. Most of them were from sects that cultivated medicinal herbs. Then, everyone's gazes turned to Manor Master Long, and Manor Master Long looked at Cult Leader Su beside him. Cult leader Su's face was also filled with rage. He slammed the table and shouted, "What a disgrace! How can our southern martial arts world have such a shameless sect? If we don't teach Rejuvenation Valley a lesson, I'm afraid they'll do even worse things in the future." That's right. Manor Master Long continued. Isn't it because of Rejuvenation Valley's evil deeds that the incense cult lost all face? That's why they spread the news that they'll ignore Rejuvenation Valley's survival for 10 years. Then, he looked at the scene and said with a smile, "Actually, this is also a message from the incense cult to the martial arts world. They want to find another sect that can replace Rejuvenation Valley. Don't you all know? Hee, don't say that you don't have such thoughts." Valley Master Pong and the others looked a little embarrassed. They looked at each other and said, "To be honest, Manor Master Long, we've also thought about the meaning behind this. It's just that our sects are weak and alone. How can we be a match for Rejuvenation Valley? Moreover, we don't have a valid reason. We're afraid that we'll provoke the other sects in the martial arts world. We can't even fight against Rejuvenation Valley, let alone some Jade Foundation alliance." Hee, it's just a mere Jade Foundation alliance. Do you think we'll be afraid of it if we join forces? When he said this, Valley Master Pong and the others' eyes were filled with fervor. But they were still a little hesitant. Valley Master Pong cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your righteousness, Manor Master Long. But to be able to cooperate with the incense cult, there can only be one sect. Our sect's strength is about the same. That's easy to say." Manor Master Long seemed to have thought it through. He waved his hand and said, "As long as we take down Rejuvenation Valley first, 10 years later, no, it's now. Whoever contributes the most in this dispute will be given the title. All of us here will give our full support." Hee, not only our support, as long as we take down Rejuvenation Valley, the things in the valley will be given to anyone here. Wouldn't it be equivalent to Rejuvenation Valley's current strength? Good. Valley Master Pong and the others didn't say it out loud. They were all cheering in their hearts. Although Rejuvenation Valley was on good terms with many sects in the southern martial arts world, they had also offended and suppressed many of them. In the martial arts world where everyone was scheming against each other, how could there be the best of both worlds? Valley Master Pong looked at the people around him and walked out of the crowd with a wine cup in his hand. He said with a smile, "Since Manor Master Long is so righteous, I'll toast you on behalf of everyone. Let's follow your plan." Manor Master Long smiled and also raised his cup. He drank it in one gulp and said, "Where did my plan come from? It's only because I listened to Sect Leader Zhou's words and got Sect Leader Su's support that I thought of it on the spot." "Manor Master, you don't have to be so polite." Sect Leader Su said with a smile, "I'm old and don't care about the affairs of the martial arts world. Otherwise, I would have taught this Rejuvenation Valley a lesson with you. The way Marshal Nye does things, cough cough, is really unreliable. Isn't it? It's precisely because he has lost face for the southern martial arts world. If we expose this guy's face now, it will also show that the southern sects are impartial. When the entire martial arts world finds out the truth, how can the entire southern martial arts world face our peers in the martial arts world?" Then, everyone spoke one after another. They raised the significance of exposing Rejuvenation Valley's conspiracy again and again. In the end, they unanimously agreed that Rejuvenation Valley was the scum of the southern martial arts world. If they weren't eradicated early, it would lead to a disaster in the future. Good. Manor Master Long clapped his hands and said, "It's rare for martial arts friends to be so righteous. I'm really proud to know all of you. Since that's the case, we'll do something according to the will of the heavens. We're willing to be the leader of this matter. We'll expose Marshal Nye's face and bring justice to the entire martial arts world." Great. Everyone clapped their hands. Manor Master Long waved his hand, and the disciples all left. He said, "Although this is a righteous action, we still need to prepare for a rainy day. We still need to make a detailed plan." "Yes, we'll listen to Manor Master's arrangement." Under the applause of the crowd, Manor Master Long slowly discussed the various details with the crowd. Although it was rushed, the details were also considered very carefully. Back at Rejuvenation Valley, a storm was brewing as well. In the 100 Herb Hall, The leaders of the Jade Foundation Alliance were all present. Beside them were a few sects that had been through thick and thin with Rejuvenation Valley. Among them, the Deer Cry sect was at the top. Deer Cry sect's Yu Yin frowned and said, "Brother Nya, the order to spread the incense cult is strange. If it's really as you said, and the medicine boy made a mistake this time, this idea was my idea. Speaking of which, it's really, of course." Before Yu Yin finished speaking, Swallowtail Mountain's Ing Zhaiju, who was stationed in Ing Stud Farm, shouted, "It was originally a good opportunity. Why did you have to talk about repaying a debt of gratitude? Stuffing someone you don't know into the incense cult. If I find out, ignoring him for 10 years is a small matter. I'll directly." Old 6, weapon forging sects, Di Yakong frowned and said, "Shut up first. We haven't figured out the reason for this matter yet. Don't complain. Ren Xiaoxia has been good to our Jade Foundation Alliance and has benefited Rejuvenation Valley greatly. However, it's just a little bit of help. How can we ignore it? But it's not just a little bit of help. He has offended the incense cult. If it weren't for that bastard, how could such a good thing have ended up like this?" -4. Chapter 936. In the face of everyone's accusations, Valley Master Nye remained silent. Nye Qinyu, who was seated below, had tears in her eyes, looking extremely aggrieved. Nye Qianrong, who was beside her, held her hand as if she was consoling her. After another round of accusations, Nye Qinyu couldn't help but stand up and walk to the front of the hall. She bowed and said, "Uncle Masters, it's all my fault for not handling the situation properly and bringing disaster to Rejuvenation Valley. But I don't think it's Brother Ren who caused this. Brother Ren's martial arts are powerful and he's extremely intelligent. Why, Sai, things have already come to this. Little you, why are you still speaking up for Ren Xiaoyao?" Zhen Xian of the weapon refining sect was a little angry. "That's enough." Valley Master Nye stood up and waved his hand. "Brothers, I've invited all of you here not to investigate the cause of this matter. If that's the case, Rejuvenation Valley can just close our doors and look for him ourselves. Why do we have to sigh? Although Ren Xiaoxia might be one of the reasons, Rejuvenation Valley is indeed indebted to him. We can't repay him and can only do this. Of course, if any of you feel that I've done something wrong and dragged the entire Jade Foundation Alliance down with me, feel free to." Second brother, weapon refining sects Si Yakong reprimanded. "What are you saying? We've been brothers for so many years. If we're afraid of causing trouble, why would we be sitting here? We've brought many of our sect's elites. Aren't you trying to disappoint us by saying such things?" Valley Master Nye bowed to the ground and said gratefully, "Thank you for your reminder, big brother. I was a little rash just now. Please forgive me." "Don't. There's nothing to forgive. What's important is to get through this crisis." Ing Zhaiju and the rest smiled and didn't think much of it. In the Snowball Stud Farm, Zhuo said in a low voice, "Perhaps things aren't as dangerous as you think, second brother. Rejuvenation Valley's reputation in the pugilistic world has always been excellent. Even their status isn't something that the other sects in our Jade Foundation Alliance can compare to. The incense cult is only giving them a warning this time." Valley Head Nye sighed. "Brothers' words are reasonable, but when Rejuvenation Valley befriended some sects, they must have offended many sects as well. Actually, even without these factors, a Rejuvenation Valley that has lost the protection of the fragrant cult is still a piece of fat meat in the eyes of many large sects." Second brother, are you talking about that mysterious power from last year? Ma Fuhu of Soaring Dragon Mountain's Fuhu Ranch asked in a low voice. "It's just a guess." Valley Master Nye nodded slightly. Ever since last year's martial arts competition to find a spouse, not even the slightest trace of this mysterious force could be found. Even the Longting Villa couldn't find any clues. Let's not go so far. Siakong waved his hand and looked down at the hall. He asked curiously, "Second brother Nye, why isn't your second girl here? You sent me the news, and I rushed over. Could it be that the whale gang is even further away than me?" Valley Master Nye was a bit tongue-tied. He shook his head and said, "A married daughter is like spilled water. Not every daughter is on her parents' side. Let's not worry about her. As he spoke, Valley Master Nye looked at Nye Chinrong and Nye Chinyu, his eyes full of affection. Oh, Siakong nodded slightly. He then said, the most important thing right now is to set up Rejuvenation Valley's defenses. Rejuvenation Valley has been at peace for many years, and it's lacking in martial strength. Big Brother is right. Valley Master Nye was a bit embarrassed. How about this? I'll teach you the elites of weapon forging sect that I've brought, and the other brothers will also teach you the men under their command. You can decide on the overall layout. First, set up Rejuvenation Valley like an iron bucket. At this point, he suddenly thought of something and said regretfully, it's a pity that although Ren Xiaoyao returned the 5 elements formation to my weapon forging sect, it hasn't been long. The elders in my sect haven't fully comprehended it yet. Otherwise, we could, after Si Yakong expressed his regret, Nye Chinyu asked timidly, eldest martial uncle, that 5 elements formation, is it really as miraculous as you say? Of course. Si Yakong said resolutely. Back then, when my weapon forging sect encountered danger, we relied on that 5 elements formation to overcome it. This is the record of the sect master 2 generations ago. How can it be false? That, Nye Chinyu's face was a bit red. She said in a low voice, your niece is untalented. A few days ago, when I heard what father said, I always wanted to help father. But, your niece doesn't have the strength to truss a chicken. No matter what I do, it's useless. So I thought of the 5 elements Dian formation that Big Brother Ren taught me. Si Yakong's eyes lit up. He hurriedly asked, so what? So your niece tried to set up the 5 elements Dian formation at the entrance of Rejuvenation Valley. Really? Si Yakong stood up with a tang and said, how can this 5 elements great derivation formation be so simple to set up? You quickly bring me to see it. Seeing that she could do something for Rejuvenation Valley, Nye Chinyu was very excited. Her face was a little red. Nye Chinrong was also very happy. The two of them held hands and brought everyone to the entrance of Rejuvenation Valley. There were a few servant girls at the entrance of the valley, as well as some trees and rocks. It looked a little messy. Those who didn't know would turn their heads left and right to find the location of the 5 elements formation. Si Yakong was pleasantly surprised. He quickly walked to the front of the rocks and took a closer look. After a long while, he sighed and said, second brother Nye, I really envy you. Even though your smart daughter doesn't know any martial arts, she alone is equivalent to dozens of people. Eldest martial uncle, is this really useful? Nye Chinyu pointed at the things on the ground in disbelief and asked, I feel that there are still many areas that are lacking. Even those inexplicable things that Big Brother Ren said at the end, I still don't understand them. Of course it can. Si Yakong said with a smile, these are just rocks. Trees don't move. If they were replaced by strong men who know martial arts, the lethality of their attacks is not something you can imagine. But Nye Chinyu was still worried. I still don't know where to set up the eye of this 5 elements formation. Eye of the formation? Don't know where to set it up? Si Yakong smiled and said, there are 6 great sects in the Jade Foundation Alliance. Even if Rejuvenation Valley doesn't have anyone who is strong in martial arts, the other 5 sects can send out 5 disciples who are strong in martial arts. Isn't that enough? If it really isn't enough, then we old bones will go all out and be the eye of your 5 elements formation. Is that all right? However, your 5 elements formation is still too small. Perhaps you only considered Rejuvenation Valley's own disciples. Now that the Jade Foundation Alliance is here to help, it's better to set up the 5 elements formation in front of the villa. Si Yakong's mood was very good. Valley Master Nye was also very happy when he heard this. He had a smile on his face. He had never thought that Ren Xiaoyao, who had done Rejuvenation Valley a great favor, would have such a remarkable ability. Even his third daughter, who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken, had exceeded his expectations. But Nye Chinyu was a little anxious. Looking at everyone, she walked to Si Yakong and said with a blush on her face, but Big Brother Ren said that using people as the eye of the formation is just inferior. This 5 elements formation can only fight against 10 people and can't unleash the full power of the 5 elements formation. What? Si Yakong was dumbfounded. This kind of thing, how come I didn't know about it? He didn't give such an explanation in the 5 elements formation that he gave. Eldest senior uncle, please don't blame me. Nie Chinyu couldn't care about anything else now and said apologetically, there are no mistakes in the 5 elements formation that Big Brother Ren copied for you. It was all written by me. It's just that, it's only after eldest senior uncle returned and Big Brother Ren explained the formation to me in detail that's when he told me about it. Ha ha ha. Si Yakong laughed and shook his head. He pointed at Valley Master Nya and said, Second brother Nya, you gave birth to a good daughter. Eldest brother, please don't blame me. Valley Master Nya cupped his fists and said, After this matter is over, I will let little you explain everything one by one. Father, Nya Chinyu rebuked him. This is the secret of Big Brother Ren's sect. Without his permission, how would I dare to tell others? Hee, a secret that won't be passed on? I don't think so. Si Yakong narrowed his eyes and smiled. Eldest senior uncle, Nye Chinyu's face was completely red. Okay, let's not talk about other things. Let's get through the current crisis first. Anyway, Ren Xiaoxia will return in a few years. At that time, I will ask him for some benefits. Si Yakong waved his hand and said. Hearing this, Nye Chinyu's eyes were filled with sorrow. She only said in her heart, if he can return in a few years, can I still think about him day and night? I'm just afraid that our previous meeting is over and we will never meet again. Seeing Nye Chinyu miserable, Nye Chinrong's heart ached. She walked in front of her sister and patted her shoulder. Nye Chinyu endured the pain in her heart and squeezed out a smile on her face. That's right, little you. Then, what did Ren Xiaoxia say to maximize the power of the 5 elements formation? Valley Master Nye saw that his daughter was unhappy and hurriedly changed the topic. Nye Chinyu looked at everyone and walked to her father's side. She whispered a few words in his ear. These few words in Valley Master Nye's ears were tantamount to a thunderbolt in the clear sky. He said in disbelief, He really said that? How is this possible? Seeing her father so surprised, Nye Chinyu was also puzzled. She asked curiously, It's just like that. Father, is there anything strange? I was also confused about what Brother Ren said at that time. I don't understand why. If Ren Xiaoxia was not already in the spreading fragrance cult, if he had said this to me at that time, I would never have sent him to the spreading fragrance cult. Father, why is this? Nye Chinyu was even more puzzled. What does it have to do with our rejuvenation valley? It's more than just related. Valley Master Nye smiled bitterly. If you didn't mention it now, how could I believe that it was just a coincidence? Coincidence? Nye Chinyu was so shocked that she covered her cherry lips with her hand. Father, I really don't understand what you are saying. Please explain. -4. Chapter 937. Coincidence? It's not just a coincidence. Valley Master Nye smiled bitterly. Then, he looked at the crowd and waved his hand, saying, Brothers, let our subordinates rest first. When little you has finished preparing everything, we'll set up a formation in front of Rejuvenation Manor and let those bastards who covet our Rejuvenation Valley see the power of the 5 elements die in formation. Valley Master Nye looked at the 5 sect masters of the Jade Foundation Alliance, Elder Yu of Deer Cry Sect, Nye Chinrong, Yu Zhonglin, and Nye Chinyu. He smiled bitterly and said, Brothers, perhaps you all know that our Rejuvenation Valley has a treasure that can hold down the valley? Treasure that can hold down the valley? Si Yakong and the others were surprised. We've heard of it before. However, it's been a long time and we've never heard Second Brother mention it. We thought it was just a rumor, Big Brother. This treasure that can hold down the valley is real. However, it's always been hidden in a secret place in Rejuvenation Valley, and only the Valley Masters of each generation know about it. Haha, Ing Zhizhu laughed. There really is such a treasure. Second Brother really hid it well. Yes, Second Brother. What is this treasure that can hold down the valley? Why are you mentioning it now? Ma Fuhu also laughed. Valley Master Nye ignored the two of them. Instead, he turned to Nye Chinyu affectionately and said, Little you must remember last year when I asked you to go to that place to get something, right? Yes, of course I remember. Nye Qianyu's face was filled with confusion. She nodded and said, could it be that it's the treasure that can hold down the valley? Yes, if that's the case, it's no wonder that someone covets it and hunts me down. Valley Master Nye nodded first, and then shook his head. That thing is related to the treasure that can hold down the valley, but it's also not. Otherwise, why would our Rejuvenation Valley's treasure be placed outside? Nye Qianyu rolled her eyes and said with a smile, according to Father, with that thing, can we find the treasure that can hold down the valley? Si Yakong and the others were enlightened. Only now did they understand why a mysterious force spent so much effort to hunt down Nye Qianyu last year. It was all for this so-called treasure that can hold down the valley. Thus, everyone began to look forward to this treasure. All right, since Rejuvenation Valley has already reached such a stage, all of you brothers have been through life and death together for many years, and this 5 elements Dayan formation is going to use the most powerful treasure in the valley. I will not avoid anything. Everyone, please wait for a moment. Little you, follow me. As she spoke, she strode towards the inner valley of Rejuvenation Valley. Nye Qianrong released Nye Qianyu's hand and nudged her, indicating for her to hurry up and follow her. Nye Qianyu nodded and chased after her. Valley Master Nye led Nye Qianyu into the inner valley without saying a word and went straight to the pill room on the left. They walked all the way to the innermost pill room and pushed the door open. After walking through a few more holes, they came to a wall. In front of the wall was a pill furnace with earth fire below it. Valley Master Nye took the pill furnace and twisted it left and right above the earth fire. No one knew what mechanism he activated, but there was a kacha sound. The smooth wall in front of them gradually rose and revealed a small room. Valley Master Nye casually picked up a torch from the wall and jumped into the room. He walked to the front of a stone pillar in the corner. Nye Qianyu followed him and looked at the protruding stone pillar. She found it strange that there was a depression at the top of the stone pillar. It was an irregular shape. Valley Master Nye walked to the front of the stone pillar and passed the torch to Nye Qianyu. He then took out a brocade box. It was the box that Nye Qianyu had risked her life to bring back. Valley Master Nye looked at Nye Qianyu and raised the brocade box for her to see. Then, he opened the brocade box. Inside the brocade box was a small jade box. Valley Master Nye stretched out his finger and tapped on the 4 legs of the jade box. Finally, he tapped on the middle of the jade box and the lid of the jade box opened. Using the light from the torch, Nye Qianyu saw an irregular jade pendant that looked like a stone pillar. Valley Master Nye took out the jade pendant and placed it in the depression of the stone pillar. It was just right. After a while, Valley Master Nye stretched out his palm and placed it on top of the stone pillar. He exerted his energy and pressed it down. A creaking sound was heard and the stone pillar actually sank. Following the sinking of the stone pillar, a small platform rose from the ground. On the platform, there were 5 small brocade boxes that were exactly the same as the previous one. When the platform rose to his chest, Valley Master Nye stopped and picked up a brocade box from the platform. He opened it as usual and smiled as he passed it to Nye Qianyu. He said, seeing the 5 brocade boxes here, I think you already know what they are. Yes, Father. Nye Qianyu didn't hide it and frowned. Could it be that this is the 5 elements item that Big Brother mentioned? That's right. Look at this. Valley Master Nye said, and took out the item from the brocade box and passed it to Nye Qianyu. Looking at the small blue stone in her hand that was similar to an ordinary jade, Nye Qianyu asked, this? What 5 elements item is this? Valley Master Nye smiled and said, this is called a vitality stone. I heard that it was a common item used by the immortals 10,000 years ago. This blue vitality stone should be the water element of the 5 elements. Vitality stone? This is the vitality stone that Big Brother mentioned? Nye Qianyu said in surprise. Big Brother said that this item is the most magical. Father, let's not talk about you. At this moment, even I am beginning to suspect Big Brother. He said that if you use the method of internal energy simulation that he taught you, you can use this vitality stone to activate the 5 elements Dayan formation. All of this seems to have been arranged by Big Brother. The method of internal energy simulation? Valley Master Nya asked. What is that? Nye Qinyu slapped her forehead and explained. It is the method that Big Brother Ren taught you. How to refine elixirs. Io, isn't that so? Valley Master Nya was also surprised. All of this, isn't it all about the treasure of our rejuvenation valley? But Big Brother Ren really didn't know. Moreover, if he had any other intentions, he would have taken this brocade box away long ago. Why would he wait until he sent me home? Nye Qinyu explained anxiously. Valley Master Nye smiled. How am I suspecting Ren Xiaoyao? However, this is too much of a coincidence. Ren Xiaoyao's martial arts are powerful. If he forced himself, how could I retaliate? Even if you don't explain, I understand. Father, Nye Qinyu rebuked, since you know, don't say such things. It's fine if Martial Uncle said it, but you are not allowed to say it. Haha, I won't say it, I won't say it. As he spoke, Valley Master Nye opened the other brocade boxes one by one. Inside were 5 elements vitality stones of different colors. All right, let's go. With these 5 elements vitality stones, if what Ren Xiaoxia said is true, our rejuvenation valley will be able to sit back and relax. Father, what kind of person is Big Brother Ren? How could he lie to me? Nye Qinyu was unhappy again. All right, then hurry up and set up the array of the Rejuvenation Mountain Manor. Let Father see how the divine powers of the Beidou School are. Oh yes, shouldn't the disciples of the Jade Foundation Alliance familiarize themselves with this array? Otherwise, how can they enter the array and kill the enemy? As Valley Master Nye spoke, he restored everything and placed the jade pendant back into the brocade box, hiding it in his chest. The undercurrents in the pugilistic world were turbulent, and the aroma sect was not peaceful either. Outside the Huan Su, a 2-day journey, Nun Jingyi was sitting cross-legged on a small hill. There was no joy or anger on her face. Xia Qing and the rest, as well as the disciples of Ruijin Hall and Zhang Xiaohua, were standing around her respectfully. Sect leader, Xia Qing asked timidly, I wonder if there are any changes in the core of the Huansu? Disciples' martial arts are limited. I really can't get close to observe it. It's all right, Nun Jingyi said in a deep voice. Not to mention you, even I can only observe from the left. I can't get close to the front. The lightning on the mountain is still the same. Although it feels a little different, it is probably caused by the changes in the Huansu array. That thing should be fine. When everyone heard this, they were relieved. Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and thought to herself, that's right. That thing is so smart and can even hide in the void. I can't even catch it with my hands. How could there be a problem? That thing is fine, but what's the deal with the Huansu array? Xia Qing, tell me everything in detail. Nun Jingyi asked. Yes, sect leader. Xia Qing answered and recounted everything that happened to her and the rest. She even told Nun Jingyi about how she was rescued. However, she changed her thoughts to that of a visit. What? When she heard that Xia Qing was rescued, Nun Jingyi forced herself to remain calm. However, when she heard that there was a person from the immortal Tao flying in the air and coming and going freely, she unconsciously stood up in shock and said in a trembling voice, Xia Qing, you? Tell me in detail about that person's appearance. After listening to Xia Qing's description, Nun Jingyi was even more incredulous. She muttered, How? How could it be Senior Huan? How many years has it been? How could he still be in this world? Could it be that Senior Huan? He cultivated the great Tao? But he was seriously injured back then. It's impossible for him to survive. If he didn't die, then I, sect leader you of the incense cult, wouldn't have died? But how is this possible? Even the legendary peak of the immortal Tao can't survive for tens of thousands of years. Nun Jingyi was completely confused. Could it be that someone is impersonating Senior Huan? Nun Jingyi naturally guessed. Immediately, Nun Jingyi's face darkened. She released her divine sense and covered everyone present. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She carefully circulated the nameless incantation to suppress her divine sense and true qi. However, at this moment, Nun Jingyi asked coldly, Ren Xiaoyao, I heard from Xia Qing that you've entered the Huansu? Zhang Xiaohua's expression didn't change. She cupped her hands and said, "Yes, who allowed you to enter?" Nun Jingyi's divine sense circled around Zhang Xiaohua. Her tone was as cold as ever. You didn't say that I couldn't enter." Zhang Xiaohua had an innocent expression. She spread her hands and said, "This disciple only wanted to help senior martial sister Xia in the Huan Su and repay sect leader's kindness. But before I could do anything, I was chased out by wild beasts." "Is that so?" Nun Jingyi chuckled. "You're a good schemer. But what's that in your arms?" Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. -4. Chapter 938. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled when he heard Nun Jingyi's question. "Things? Nothing? What is Sir Religious Leader talking about?" Nun Jingyi's divine sense didn't leave Zhang Xiaohua. She coldly said, "Then, take out the things in your bosom and let me see them." "Yes," Zhang Xiaohua obediently said. He then took out the things in his bosom. They were a short sword, a jade box, a token, some miscellaneous items, and a piece of silk. Nun Jingyi separated a strand of her divine sense and covered the jade box. She sneered and said, "Ren Xiaoyao, what's inside this jade box? Is this yours?" Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and said, "Sir Religious Leader, this jade box isn't mine. It was given to a female disciple called Jing Yi at Lingering Fragrance Peak by a person called Emo Qingshan." Shut up. How dare you mention Lord Sect Master's name?" Before Nun Jingyi could speak, Xia Qing berated her loudly. "Sir Religious Leader's name?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He said with a trembling voice, "Sir Religious Leader is Jingyi?" Humph. When Nun Jingyi heard Emo Qingshan's name, she was clearly stunned. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hear any real anger in her snort. Zhang Xiaohua bowed and said, "Sir Religious Leader, please forgive this lowly one. This lowly one has only been spreading the incense cult for a short period of time. Normally, when I come early, I'm called by Sir Religious Leader. I don't know Sir Religious Leader's name." "And ignorance is not a crime." Nun Jingyi waved her hand and said, "What's inside this jade box? Have you seen it?" Zhang Xiaohua said curiously, "Of course I've seen it. Otherwise, how would I know it's for Sir Religious Leader?" As he spoke, he handed over the blood letter. Nun Jingyi took the letter but didn't read it. She said, "Open the jade box." When Zhang Xiaohua opened it, Nun Jingyi asked, "Do you recognize this item?" Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. "I know it's called Chao Huandan, but I've never heard of it before." "Well, although you haven't heard of it, you must know that it's a rare item. Of course, something that Senior Emo risked his life to obtain is naturally a treasure." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Then you don't have any thoughts of keeping it for yourself?" "Of course not." Zhang Xiaohua said righteously, "A gentleman's desire for wealth is justified. This is an item that contains Senior Mo's deep love. I only want to bring it back to Jing. Cult leader, how can I have other thoughts?" "He's lying." Xia Qing, who was at the side, actually said, "Sect Master, the day before yesterday outside the ruins of Huan, I asked him about the situation in the ruins of Huan. He didn't tell me anything at all." "Senior Sister Xia, you've wrongly accused me." Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand why Xia Qing was making things difficult for her. She only explained, "At that time, I was about to report it, but Senior Sister was in a hurry to report it to Sect Master, so you stopped me. I didn't have any thoughts of hiding it from you." "Then, Ren Xiaoyao, why didn't you say anything when you saw me just now?" "Sect Master, you didn't seem to give me a chance to speak." Zhang Xiaohua said helplessly, "Actually, Sect Master, you're overthinking. If I wanted to keep it for myself, I could have just torn the blood letter. No one would know that it belonged to Senior Mo, don't you think so?" "Well, that's true." Nun Jingyi's tone was obviously gentler. "Ren Xiaoyao, take everything back. This jade box and the blood letter. I'll take them. You, tell me what happened inside, especially how you met Emo Qingshan." Zhang Xiaohua put the things back into her chest and told her about her encounter with Emo Qingshan again. Of course, this wasn't the truth. She only said that she saw Emo Qingshan's corpse while walking around aimlessly. She just took the things and buried the corpse. Then she ran out when the formation shook. Was there anything else next to Emo Qingshan's corpse? Nun Jingyi asked. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head like a rattle drum. No, there were only two things. Maybe there was something else, but I was a little panicked and didn't notice anything. Well, it's good that you were merciful enough to bury his corpse. It's just the location. Nun Jingyi was a little sad. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Sect Master. I was a little lost. The formation shook and everything became chaotic. Even if I wanted to find it, I couldn't. Sigh, don't look anymore. So what if you found it? So what if you didn't? Nun Jingyi whispered. She then stood up and looked at the ruins of Huanshu in the distance. It wasn't clear if she was looking at Emo Qingshan's corpse or searching for that mysterious Wanwuxin. After a while, she waved her hand and said, Let's go back to Lingering Fragrance Peak first. It wasn't just one day. Everyone followed Nun Jingyi to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how others usually followed Nun Jingyi. She only knew that this time, everyone quietly rode their horses and followed Nun Jingyi silently. Nun Jingyi also rode a fine horse and led the way. She was about 10 feet away from everyone. She didn't look back or pay attention to the people behind her. Nun Jingyi had a veil over her face, and Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to release her divine sense. She could only look at the rather lonely figure in front of her, and she felt rather sentimental. Even though she was the master of a cult, and not only did she have an awe-inspiring reputation in incense cult, she was also famous in the entire world of martial artists, and there was no one who did not submit to her. She still had the emotions of a mortal in her heart. She might not be able to show them normally, but at some point in time, she would be touched by certain memories and certain things, and the tenderness in her heart would always be touched. Other things aside, when Nun Jingyi and Emo Qingshan went through the 3 tests of love together, Nun Jingyi was willing to jump off the cliff for Emo Qingshan. This kind of affection was as deep as the sea. How could she not leave a pure land for Emo Qingshan in her heart? Before today, perhaps the space of the Pure Land had already been sealed. However, in front of the Chao Huan pill that Emo Qingshan had risked his life to obtain, the sky that Nun Jingyi had forcefully supported collapsed with a loud rumble. The memories of the past, the feelings that were like the sea, had drowned her like a tide. Seeing that they had arrived at Lingering Fragrance Peak, Zhang Xiaohua saw the rough stone tablet by the mountain path. She couldn't help but be moved. This rough stone tablet was similar to the stone tablet that she had refined before. Could it be that she could use the same method to refine it? Of course, this thought only hovered in Zhang Xiaohua's mind for a moment before disappearing. If she wanted to do this, she had to find a moonless and windy night. The disciples of Ruijin Palace, who were guarding the mountain, did not behave the same way as when Zhang Xiaohua came. They came out of the protective formation from afar and stood by the mountain path to welcome Nun Jingyi. Nun Jingyi was expressionless. She rode her horse to the front of the mountain and raised her head to look at the towering Lingering Fragrance Peak. Then, she looked at the disciples of Ruijin Palace who were respectfully surrounding her. Soon after, she let out a long howl. This long howl was like metal and stone splitting the air. The sound shook the surroundings and startled countless celestial birds, Lord's sect leader. The surrounding disciples were horrified. They covered their ears and fell to the ground as they cried out in alarm. Zhang Xiaohua's face was filled with surprise. She also bent over on the back of the odd beast and pretended to be attacked. However, her eyes were secretly looking through Huan's neck. Nun Jingyi's long howl lasted for half a cup of tea's time before she stopped. Then, she looked up to the sky and laughed. However, this laughter was filled with sorrow and relief. Then, she floated up and used her lightness skill to rush to the mountain path of Lingering Fragrance Peak. After a few leaps, she disappeared without a trace. Her laughter followed her to the top of Lingering Fragrance Peak. After a while, the people lying on the ground got up from the ground with a trace of pain on their faces. Who could say anything? After tidying up, the disciples of Ruijin Palace were still patrolling. Xiaqing and the others calmed down and went up the stairs to Emo Qian Palace. Inside Emo Qian Palace, everything was the same. Nun Jingyi was still sitting at the top. Although she couldn't see her face and didn't know her mood, Zhang Xiaohua could still easily feel a kind of relaxation from the air in Emo Qian Palace. On both sides of Nanjing Yi were Nanjing Fan, Nunshuezhen, Peacock, Qinshun, Yu Yan, and a few others whom Zhang Xiaohua didn't know. They all had doubts on their faces and kept silent. Everyone stood still. Zhang Xiaohua was at the back. Xiaqing went forward and told everyone what happened in Huansu. Everyone was surprised and looked at Nanjing Yi. Nanjing Yi sighed and said, "After hearing Xiaqing's report, I immediately rushed to the core of the ruins of Huanshu. Although the great formation of the ruins of Huanshu has collapsed and spiritual beasts are rampaging, the great formation at the core is still there and the heavenly thunder is still there. Nothing much has changed. That thing should still be there." Seeing that everyone was relieved, Nanjing Yi said again, "But the Immortal Path Senior who appeared in Huansu. According to Xiaqing's description, it should be Immortal Path Senior Huan. Senior Huan?" Everyone who knew was shocked and shouted, "How? How is this possible?" That's right. Nanjing Yi was helpless as well. Everyone knows that Huan Su was renamed from cult leader Yu to Huan Su to commemorate Senior Huan. Since cult leader Yu thinks that Senior Huan has no physiology, then Senior Huan definitely won't be alive. Moreover, how many years has it been? How can there be someone who has lived for so many years in this world? Even if it's the immortal path, its lifespan is limited. Nanjing Fan frowned and said, "I think so too. But if it's not Senior Huan, then who could it be? Moreover, the cultivation of the immortal path is so high that it can fly. This is the cultivation of Senior Huan in the records." After pondering for a moment, Peacock said, "Fortunately, no matter what, this person is still the forearm of our fragrant sect. Although he can't show his real face, he saved Lily, Xiaqing, and the others. Moreover, he can control the mountain-shaking bear. This seems to be an unexpected power. Yes, the Yuhuandan pill in Lily's body is several times better than the Yuhuandan pill we're using now. If it wasn't for our fragrant sect's Immortal Path Senior, he wouldn't have been able to make it," Nanjing Yi added. Zhang Xiaohua stood in the hall and looked at Ming's figure. Unconsciously, she focused on listening to everyone's guesses about him. At this moment, a weak divine sense swept over. Then, a sword light shot towards Zhang Xiaohua. -4. Chapter 939. When the divine sense swept past, Zhang Xiaohua became alert and focused his attention outside the hall. When the sword light rushed up, he pretended to be absent-minded and looked outside the hall. Zhang Xiaohua pretended to panic and didn't care about etiquette. He took a step forward and fled into Emotian's palace. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't release his divine sense and didn't have time to see who was attacking him, he thought that as long as he caught Nanjing Yi's attention, who would dare to be arrogant in Emotian's palace? Unexpectedly, things went beyond his expectations. He quickly moved forward and escaped the attack of the sword light. However, when the person who attacked saw Zhang Xiaohua dodging, he didn't give up and chased after Zhang Xiaohua. A sharp light followed behind Zhang Xiaohua. "Sect leader, save me," Zhang Xiaohua shouted and wanted to use the ethereal steps. At this moment, Nanjing exerted strength in her feet and floated into the air. With a few steps, she arrived beside Zhang Xiaohua. She stretched out her hand and caught the sword light behind Zhang Xiaohua with 2 fingers. She said coldly, "Elder Jinggang, what are you doing?" Zhang Xiaohua hid behind Nanjing Yi. When she turned around, she saw Jinggang floating down. Nanjing had a veil on her face, but the undulation of the veil made her look extremely angry. Oh no, could it be that something has been exposed? Zhang Xiaohua's heart thumped. However, he was no longer as nervous as when he first arrived at Lingering Fragrance Peak. He took a look and pretended to tremble. Nanjing, this lowly one. How did this lowly one offend you? You actually sneak attack me from behind? What Nanjing did just now was the shameless sneak attack from behind in the pugilistic world. Elder Jinggang, do you have anything to say? Jingyi said coldly. Emotian's palace is not a place to use weapons. Although you are the sect's grand elder, you still have to abide by the sect's rules. If you can't give a reason, don't blame me for being impartial. Jingyi Shirtai kept calling Jinggang Shirtai elder, but never mentioned the title of senior sister because she was angry. Sect leader is so impressive. Jing Gang didn't avoid it and sneered. 3 of my disciples were killed by this shameless brat. How can you make me calm? If I don't kill him, how can I face Shuochuan? Jing Yisherdai frowned and said in surprise, Elder Jing Gang, you can't talk nonsense. How could Ren Xiaoyao kill Yu Zhuochuan? Moreover, the 2 of them have nothing to do with each other. There's no reason for them to have a dispute. If I can use my sword in Emotian's palace, I naturally have something to use against him. Otherwise, how can I dare to kill in front of sect leader? Jing Gang was furious and didn't put Jing Yi's prestige in her eyes. A trace of anger flashed in Nun Jing Yi's eyes. She looked at the long sword in her hand and scolded, Put down the long sword. I'm here. Tell me the whole story. If Yu Zhuochuan was harmed by Ren Xiaoyao, I'll definitely redress her grievances. Nun Jing Gang pondered for a moment and loosened her grip. At the same time, Nun Jing Yi also loosened her grip and the long sword fell to the ground. Nun Jing Gang's arm moved slightly, wanting to grab the long sword. However, just as she moved her hand, she felt a chill. She subconsciously raised her head and saw Nun Jing Yi's murderous gaze. Jing Gang was startled. She heard the sound of the sword falling to the ground. Humph! Nun Jing Gang snorted and coldly looked at the panicking Zhang Xiaohua. She quickly walked over to Nun Jing Yi's chair and sat down. Jing Yi looked at Zhang Xiaohua and then at the surprised crowd in the hall. She asked softly, Ren Xiaoyao, do you know Yu Zhuochuan? Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Oh? Jing Yi was surprised. How did you know him? He is a disciple of Ruijin Hall. You, even if you are an alchemy boy from distant Fire Hall, you shouldn't have met him. Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and told her everything about her encounter with Yu Zhuochuan. She even told her about Shi Mujuan's threat. Finally, she said, This disciple never saw Senior Yu again. You're lying. Jing Gang said sternly, You killed Zhuochuan when you were testing your martial arts in Emerald Valley. Emerald Valley? Testing martial arts? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. She explained, Great Elder, what you said is strange. Emerald Valley is a place where disciples test their martial arts. Only this disciple entered that day. How could this disciple see Senior Yu and even kill him? Chun Chun was already impatient. He frowned and said, That's right. Great Elder, your words are a little irrelevant. Jing Gang glared at Qin Chun and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. She said fiercely, Ren Xiaoyao, can you really pat your chest and swear that you were the only one in Emerald Valley? That you didn't see anyone else? Of course. Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate at all. He patted his chest and said, I, Ren Xiaoyao, swear that I am the only one in Lichui Valley, and I have not met a second person. If I speak a lie, may the heavens strike me with 5 bolts of lightning, and may I, Ren Xiaoyao, suffer the pain of being struck by lightning. Her words were powerful, and her expression did not change at all. But Jing Gang still shook her head. It's just a few oaths. You can't take it seriously. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and asked Jing Yi, When this disciple entered Emerald Valley that day, I saw that the valley was different from what Zhang Pinger said. I wanted to go back and explain, but I was afraid that senior sister Mei Suiying would find other problems for this disciple. So I went all the way. Fortunately, I was lucky and found a so-called ghost face mushroom in the innermost part of Emerald Valley. Although this disciple did not know its age, it was already in the innermost part, and there was no more. So I braced myself and went back to report. But, without waiting for Jing Yi to speak, Jing Gang said loudly, But Mei Suiying did see Zhuochuan enter Emerald Valley that day. Huh. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised again. She said loudly, I don't know. What did senior brother you do in Emerald Valley that day? Did Jing Gang need to say what Yu Zhuochuan did? Just now, Zhang Xiaohua had described the scene of her meeting with Yu Zhuochuan. Then there was Shi Mujuan's words. How could everyone not understand the possible relationship between Zhang Xiaohua, Zhang Pinger, and Yu Zhuochuan? How could they not know what Yu Zhuochuan was doing in Emerald Valley? Qin Shun glared fiercely at Zhang Xiaohua and said in a low voice, This kid doesn't look attractive. Why does he attract bees and butterflies? Although his voice was soft, everyone in the hall heard it clearly. Zhang Xiaohua's face reddened slightly. Jingyi thought for a moment and said, "Tell Zhang Pinger from Distant Fire Palace to come to Emotian Palace." Then she said, "Mei Suiying, come in and talk?" "Yes." A timid voice came from outside the door. The one who came in was Mei Suiying. She walked in and looked at the people in the hall. Her eyes flickered. Only when she saw Nun Jinggang sitting on top did she feel relieved. After coming forward to greet her, Jingyi said coldly, "Arranging for Ren Xiaoyao to test his martial arts in Emerald Valley and then having Yu Zhuochuan ambush him. Was it you who planned this behind the scenes?" "Yes, this disciple." But before she finished speaking, Mei Suiying immediately felt that something was wrong. She changed her words and said, "This disciple didn't plan it alone. It was senior brother Yu who ordered this disciple to do it." Jing Gang moved her body but didn't say anything. "Good. Tell me the whole story." The matter was very simple. Yu Zhuochuan saw that Zhang Xiaohua treated him coldly. Of course, he knew the crux of the matter. He found Mei Suiying, who also harbored evil intentions towards Zhang Xiaohua. The timing was also coincidental. It was just in time for the fragrance cult's inheritance test. The person in charge of Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts test, eldest martial sister Han Zhuoqi, didn't have time. Thus, she gave this unnecessary test to Mei Suiying. Therefore, the two of them worked together to design this unexpected martial arts test. They wanted to take Zhang Xiaohua's life in Ghost Valley. "You saw with your own eyes that Yu Zhuochuan entered Emerald Valley after Ren Xiaoyao?" Jingyi asked coldly. "Yes, this disciple saw it with her own eyes." Mei Suiying looked at Jinggang and answered, Then, what color was Yu Zhuochuan's clothes that day?" Jingyi asked. This, Mei Suiying was somewhat hesitant. She whispered, "Senior martial brother Yu's Qinggong is very strong. This disciple didn't see it clearly. It seemed to be cyan." "Oh no, it should be white." Jingyi sneered. "What color was it?" "Cyan." Mei Suiying gritted her teeth. At this moment, Jingyi raised her head and said, "Let Zhang Pinger come in." "Who is the other female disciple?" Zhang Xiaohua raised her head and saw the indifferent Zhang Pinger and the nervous Shui Linglong come in side by side. Shui Linglong and Zhang Pinger bowed. This disciple was working beside Moxian Palace. When I heard Hierarch summon, I hurried over. "May I know what Hierarch is here for?" Zhang Pinger, tell this Hierarch. A month ago, when my Hierarch's protector disciple Ren Xiaoyao tested his martial arts in Emerald Valley, did he go in alone? Ren Xiaoyao? Emerald Valley tested his martial arts? Zhang Pinger frowned. Her face was slightly red. She looked at Shui Linglong and slightly tilted her head. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua, she couldn't help but get angry. However, she was still respectful. She said in a deep voice, "On that day, Senior Martial Brother Run went in alone. You didn't see the second person?" "No." "You didn't see Yu Zhuochuan go in? Senior Martial Brother Yu?" Zhang Pinger's face was red. She was even more surprised. However, she seemed to have realized something. She shook her head. "No, Hierarch. This disciple stayed at the entrance of Emerald Valley the whole day. I didn't see anyone other than Senior Martial Brother Ren go in." "Oh, this is my senior martial sister Shui Linglong. She also accompanied me at the entrance of the valley that day. She can testify." "Yes, Hierarch. This disciple Shui Linglong was also at the entrance of Emerald Valley that day. I didn't see anyone go in." "That's strange. Lai Chui Valley is shrouded in ghost fog, so it's impossible to come down from above. You can only enter from the valley entrance. If you haven't seen it, how can it be said that Yu Zhuochuan has entered the valley?" -4. Chapter 940. Mei Suiying, tell me the truth. Did you really see Yu Zhuochuan enter the valley? Jingyi yelled harshly. Mei Suiying shuddered in fright. There seemed to be a kind of majesty in that rebuke. Disciple. Mei Suiying said with a sobbing tone, "Disciple, made an agreement with Senior Brother Yu." Disciple attracted Zhang Pinger and the others' attention so that Senior Brother Yu could enter the valley. Disciple, really didn't see Senior Brother Yu enter the valley with my own eyes. How dare you? Jing Gang leaped up. How dare you? Another voice sounded. Elder Jing Gang, this is Emotian Palace. You have repeatedly provoked our sect. Could it be that you know that we won't punish you? You. Jing Gang gritted her teeth. Sect leader, Yu Zhuochuan is my direct disciple and also your martial nephew. You. Why do you keep siding with an outsider? Sect leader, please be merciful and let me hack this guy to death. Let's see if he still dares to talk back. Shut up. Jingyi yelled, Elder Jing Gang. Although Ren Xiaoyao is not a direct disciple of our fragrant cult, he is still a protector's disciple. If there is no real evidence, how can others be convinced if we kill him directly? Then just torture him. Our fragrant cult has many ways to extort confessions. I don't believe that he won't tell the truth. Nun Jingyi shook her head slightly. Eldest senior sister, I understand your feelings, but teaching is like running a country. You can't just do whatever you want. We can't torture a disciple just based on a few baseless words. Moreover, although Ren Xiaoyao's martial arts are high, he is still far from being Yu Zhuochuan's opponent. Senior sister's deduction is based on Yu Zhuochuan entering the valley. But what if Yu Zhuochuan didn't enter the valley? Oh right, did senior sister find anything in Li Chui Valley? Jing Gang shook her head. After receiving Mei Suiying's report, I personally went to take a look. As expected, the ghost fog in Li Chui Valley was mostly gone. I didn't find anything strange. Did you search carefully? Yes, I did. I sent dozens of Rue Jin Palace disciples to search the entire Li Chui Valley. There was no trace. Senior sister, that's right. If it is as you said, just relying on your God, it's impossible not to find any clues. You didn't see it, and the disciples didn't find it. How could it be related to Ren Xiaoyao? But, Sect Master, Zhuokun was fine at Lingxiang Peak, but Ren Xiaoyao came and disappeared. How can I not be suspicious? Nun Jingyi sighed and looked at the silent Zhang Xiaohua. She nodded slightly and said, the aroma sect has been quiet for many years. Now, it's like a stagnant water with no ripples. Not to mention the immortal Dao Senior and Huan Su. Even the Dragon Sect, the Righteous Dao Alliance, and that mysterious sect have planted spies in our sect. This time, when Xia Qing and the others returned from Huan Su, they were attacked by the enemy. That day, Xia Qing and the others were seriously injured. If not for my timely arrival, I'm afraid they would have died in the enemy's hands. If that's the case, when the enemy destroys these people like the dead disciples, where will we find them? Don't tell me you're going to find a disciple and torture him? It's a bit chaotic now. The disciples of Spreading Fragrance sect should work together to maintain order in the sect, not fight and scheme against each other. Mei Suiying, you conspired with Yu Zhuochuan to plot against the disciples of our sect. You have violated the third rule of the sect. Fortunately, it was only a plan and not implemented. I'll warn you once. Go back to the hall and receive your punishment. I won't pursue the other matters. Thank you, Sect Master. Mei Suiying didn't dare to say anything. She was already very lucky that Jingyi didn't delve into her relationship with Yu Zhuochuan. Moreover, from Jingyi's words, the punishment wasn't too severe. How could she not thank her? Jing Gang sat on the chair and watched as Jingyi dismissed everyone. She was furious. Although she wasn't certain, she had a faint feeling that Zhang Xiaohua was the one who killed Yu Zhuochuan ever since Mei Suiying went to Rue Jin Palace and reported to her. However, she didn't know why Jingyi was so partial to Zhang Xiaohua and didn't even torture her. It really puzzled her. However, she didn't plan to let Zhang Xiaohua go. When Jingyi waved her hand to dismiss Xia Qing and the others, Jing Gang rolled her eyes and said, Sect Master, there are dangers everywhere in the sect. All the disciples under us are busy, and it's hard to find suitable disciples. Moreover, they are familiar with the entire sect, and it's difficult to investigate them. Ren Xiaoyao is a newcomer, and no one knows him. In my opinion, it's suitable for him to investigate the spies in the sect. Jingyi frowned and stared at Jing Gang for a while. She said, Ren Xiaoyao was injured in Huan Su. We can't let him go down the mountain immediately. It won't be too late to let him go after he recovers, right? Jing Gang smiled. Moreover, Ren Xiaoyao is the guardian disciple of our fragrant sect. If we don't do something, I'm afraid many disciples won't be convinced. Yes, what senior sister said makes sense. Nun Jingyi thought for a moment and decided to give Nun Jinggang a way out. She nodded and said, Ren Xiaoyao, Rest for a few days on Lingxiang Peak and heal your injuries. Then, go down the mountain and have a look. This time, you were almost attacked by the enemy. If you can find one or two among the many disciples, it can be considered as revenge." Zhang Xiaohua bowed and said, "I'll follow sect master's orders. After I see Zixia, I'll pack up and prepare to go down the mountain." Hee, junior brother Ren has a good plan. If junior sister Zixia knows, she'll be happy. Peacock, who had been listening carefully, said, "Unfortunately, when junior brother went down the mountain last time, junior sister Zixia went into closed-door training and hasn't come out yet. I'm afraid she'll disappoint junior brother." Meng is in closed-door training? Zhang Xiaohua was a little regretful and happy. He asked, "I don't know." At this time, Qinshan waved his hand and said, "We don't know much about it. We only know that junior sister Zixia is in closed-door training, and her time is uncertain. I'm afraid you won't be able to see her before you go down the mountain." Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said, "Then I'll take my leave. Meng, I hope senior sisters will take care of her." Qinshan laughed. "Zixia isn't just yours. She's also our junior sister. Don't worry and go." Zhang Xiaohua bowed and left Emotion Palace. He didn't have any injuries and had healed himself along the way. Why would he need to treat his injuries? However, Zhang Xiaohua was still in the house outside Emotion Palace. He closed the door for 3 days and 3 nights. He was thinking along the way, combining the sword playing the world in his mind and the human figure in the stone tablet, and carefully comprehending the sword controlling technique. 3 days later, in the morning, the door opened and Zhang Xiaohua's tall and thin figure walked out of the house. At this time, there was only confidence in his eyes. It was as if the world was in his hands. Looking at the quiet surroundings, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and released his divine sense. The range of his divine sense wasn't large, only 100 feet. Immediately, he understood the situation around him. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly frowned. About 70 to 80 feet away, there was a hidden place. There was a disciple of Ruijin Palace hiding there, and secretly looking in his direction. Zhang Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Then, he pretended that he didn't know and took a stroll by the side of the house. Since Zhang Xiaohua came to Emotion Palace, he had been very careful and didn't release his divine sense. Now that he had something to rely on, he found something interesting. The range of 10 feet wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. Not long after, many disciples had passed by. Zhang Xiaohua didn't do it intentionally, but he found that there were fluctuations of heaven and earth yuan qi on most of the disciples. Why is that? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised, but after a while, he understood that the fragrant religion was a great religion left behind by the immortal Tao for 10,000 years. Moreover, it was under the protection of the array. Although the loss of yuan qi was great, there was still some of it left behind in the fragrant religion. Moreover, there were many artifacts of the immortal Tao, no matter if they were broken, scattered, or useless. Although these scattered artifacts were useless, it couldn't stop the disciples from liking them. Therefore, some of them carried the useless jade pendants on their bodies, and some of them inlaid the fragments of the artifacts on their swords. The fluctuation of yuan qi came from these useless fragments. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Compared to them, he was really poor. Just as he was thinking, a disciple caught sight of him from afar and quickly fled. "Io, what's the reason for this?" Zhang Xiaohua almost wanted to touch his nose. Needless to say, the disciples of the Ruijin Palace must have been sent by Jing Gang. Why did the disciple who just left? Not long after, the disciple returned with something wrapped in yellow silk in his hand. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua, he said in a deep voice, "Are you Ren Xiaoyao's junior brother Ren?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He cupped his hands and said, "That's me. May I know why senior sister is looking for me?" The disciple handed over the thing in his hand and said with a smile, "I am under the order of the hierarch to bestow this internal strength mental cultivation method to you." Internal strength mental cultivation method? Zhang Xiaohua didn't care about it in his heart, but his face was full of joy. He received it with both hands and said, "Thank you for the hierarch's gift." Yes, the hierarch said that Ren Xiaoyao is our sect's protector disciple. Although his internal strength isn't his forte, he can't be too vulgar. This internal strength mental cultivation method is practiced by the disciples of the Imo Nin Palace of the incense cult. He needs to exhaust himself and work hard to cultivate it. Don't disappoint the hierarch. Thank you for the hierarch's kindness. Zhang Xiaohua bowed. He knew that this was his reward for bringing back Imo Qingshan's relics, so he accepted it with a clear conscience. -4. Chapter 941. Also, Lord Cult Leader said that if there is nothing wrong with your injuries, you should go down the mountain as soon as possible. You have to be more careful along the way. Yes, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. I will pack up and prepare to go out. Senior Martial Sister, please report back to Lord Cult Leader. This disciple will definitely find out what happened. I will report it as it is. The disciple nodded and turned to leave. After that, Zhang Xiaohua packed up a little and also rode down the mountain on the David's deer. Only the disciple of Ruijin Palace followed her for a while and disappeared. After leaving lingering Fragrance Peak, Zhang Xiaohua became bolder. She released her divine sense and saw that the disciple of Ruijin Palace who was following her disappeared. She couldn't help but sneer in her heart. Nun Jingyi was the cult leader of Ruijin cult. Her martial arts cultivation was definitely something that Zhang Xiaohua couldn't catch up with even if she rode the David's deer. As for the Immortal Path's magical powers that she had inherited, it was estimated that many of them were also things that Zhang Xiaohua couldn't reach. However, if she were to encounter Nun Jingyi, Zhang Xiaohua only had 2 magical powers to protect herself. One was the Transfiguration Technique, and the other was the Imperial Wind Technique. Both of these were worse than Nun Jingyi's, not to mention Nun Jinggang, whose divine sense was much weaker than Nun Jingyi's. In addition, Zhang Xiaohua had just comprehended the true Imperial Sword Technique. Zhang Xiaohua really didn't put Nun Jinggang in her eyes. Of course, Nun Jinggang was the successor of Ruijin cult and had been immersed in the Immortal Path cultivation for many years. There was always something that Zhang Xiaohua didn't expect. If Nun Jinggang didn't force her, Zhang Xiaohua would definitely not go against her. After riding on Huan Huan for half a day, Zhang Xiaohua gradually felt impatient. Although Huan Huan's leg strength was good, it was still lacking compared to the Imperial Wind Technique. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and found a place with lush trees to throw Huan Huan down. She also found a low-lying place to hide the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword. Then, she used the Transfiguration Technique and a handsome man with a moderate figure appeared. He laughed a few times, and with a wave of his sleeves, he flew into the air and disappeared without a trace. An hour after Zhang Xiaohua disappeared, on a mountain path not far away, a gray figure appeared. This person was wearing gray clothes-fitting clothes, and her entire head was covered. Her face couldn't be seen. Only the curves of her body could be recognized as a woman. The woman jumped onto a tree and looked up at the winding mountain path. She muttered to herself, "This is clearly the path. Why can't I see any trace of him?" Then, she laughed and said, "Hee, could it be that he knows? Did he go in the opposite direction? Then he turned around and went somewhere else? Humph, I want to see where he can go in the 19 mountains of Ruijin cult." As she spoke, the woman turned around and headed in another direction. When the woman had just left, about 500 feet away, on a protruding hill, a weak light flashed, following which, a handsome man appeared on the hill. Looking at the woman's gradually disappearing figure, he frowned and said, Who is this woman? Is she chasing me?" But then, he laughed and said, "How could she be chasing me? Maybe she's chasing that unlucky guy called Ren Xiaoyao." After that, he rubbed his nose and did the same thing as Zhang Xiaohua. Then, he jumped and went in another direction. Wasn't this handsome man Zhang Xiaohua had disguised as the so-called Panin? After Zhang Xiaohua found her direction, she disguised herself and traveled with the wind. She traveled for more than half a day. In this half a day, Zhang Xiaohua rode the wind and performed the flying technique that she had just learned. The flying technique was the best technique in the Misty School. If one's cultivation had not reached a certain level, they would not be able to perform it. However, Zhang Xiaohua was indeed talented in the flying technique. She had comprehended it earlier, but her vital energy was limited and her cultivation was shallow. Thus, she could not practice it well. This time, she had gained some benefits in the ruins of Huanshu and started to practice the flying technique. She was just at the beginning, so it was the right time. Yes, it's here. Zhang Xiaohua, who was flying unsteadily in the air, saw a cliff and landed. It was the place where Xia Qing and the others were attacked a few days ago. Just when Zhang Xiaohua wanted to soar up again and take out the things he had buried according to his memory, his heart suddenly moved. He was actually vigilant. It seemed that there was some movement in the stone tablet he had refined. Oh no! Could it be that someone has discovered it? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She immediately went underground and went straight to the place where she sensed the danger. As she walked, Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. This place is so remote that I can't even see a single disciple. Only the disciples of the Ruijin Palace who are guarding the ruins of Huanshu may pass by. I just buried the things. How could someone discover it? When did my character become so bad? When Zhang Xiaohua was a little closer, she released her divine sense. Sure enough, at the place where Zhang Xiaohua buried the money bag, there was a person in a black robe. This person was tall, and his whole head was covered by the cloak of the robe. Before Zhang Xiaohua could scan with her divine sense to see the face under the cloak, she saw the person move. He seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly turned around and looked around. It was an old man with white hair, a white face, and slender eyes. The old man looked around with extreme vigilance. Then, he used his qinggong to come to a high ground. Seeing that there was no one else, he muttered something. His fingers moved slightly a few times, and he returned to the place where he stood just now. This old man can actually discover my divine sense? But why is he just standing there? If he wants to take out the things that I placed in the restriction, wouldn't he have to dig up the mountain rocks? As she thought about it, Zhang Xiaohua immersed her divine sense into the mountain rocks and looked at the restriction. It didn't matter as the restriction and things were still there. However, outside the restriction, there were actually many pitch-black insects. These insects were extremely small and black, just like a black fog. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. This seems to have seen it somewhere before. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was alarmed. She turned around slightly and saw a wisp of black fog approaching her from less than 3 feet above her right hand. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohua didn't have time to think. He quickly formed a hand seal and dove into the ground. At the same time, an old voice coldly rang out. Where did this thief come from? How dare you peep at me? Eh? Then, the cold voice revealed a hint of astonishment. Obviously, he knew that Zhang Xiaohua had escaped underground. Zhang Xiaohua had escaped underground and wanted to heave a sigh of relief. However, when her divine sense swept behind her, she realized that the wisp of black fog had followed her. Since the black fog formed by the black insects could discover the restriction underground, of course, it could also chase after Zhang Xiaohua. Moreover, the insects flew very quickly and Zhang Xiaohua couldn't get rid of them while she was in the earth escape technique. After pondering for a while, Zhang Xiaohua formed a seal and headed towards the restriction. That old man could obviously see Zhang Xiaohua's movement through the black insects. He was slightly taken aback. Then, his lips moved slightly and a chanting sound was heard. At the same time, his fingers moved again. In an instant, a portion of the black insects that were hiding on the restriction secretly came out from the front. The old man had a good idea. He wanted to attack from the front and back, but his divine sense didn't seem strong enough. Perhaps he could only rely on the black insects to determine Zhang Xiaohua's movement. How could he be as agile as Zhang Xiaohua? Zhang Xiaohua made a few turns and left the black insects behind her. Then, she found an opening and quickly swept past the restriction. When she got closer, she saw the black insect that was hiding on the restriction. It was smaller than a flea. One of its antennae was bent and pressed against the restriction. The 2 transparent wings on its back were flapping slightly. On the antennae, there was an even more subtle fluctuation. With this flickering, the restriction was corroded bit by bit. After seeing the appearance of the black insect, Zhang Xiaohua immediately realized that this was the mysterious black insect that she had extracted from Oyan's Mudpill Palace on Shixin Peak. Could it be that this old man is the consecrator of Lingxiang Peak, who had a conflict with Nanjing Yi? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, and her actions weren't slow. She pinched an incantation gesture and hit the original restriction. That restriction shone brightly and shook the black insect a foot away. Zhang Xiaohua took advantage of this gap and reached out her hand to take out the money pouch, belt, bracelet, and other items from the restriction. Following that, she kept them into her bosom. Only then did she put down the stone in her heart. With a sharp whistle, she dashed out of the ground. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua rush out of the ground with a whoosh and float in the air, the already surprised old man's face became even more solemn. He stretched out his hand to reach for a weapon at his waist. However, just as his hand touched the weapon, he paused and immediately pulled out a small, sparkling and translucent jade ruby from his bosom. Holding the jade ruby in his hand, the old man then raised his head and asked in a deep voice, "This, young friend, this thing underground was discovered by me. Why did you snatch it?" "You discovered it?" Zhang Xiaohua saw that the old man wasn't afraid of her using the earth escape technique and the wind controlling technique, and even questioned her. She couldn't help but become vigilant. Using her divine sense, she saw that those black insects had drilled out of the ground and were gathering in the air above the old man's head. They were black and faint and didn't move forward to attack. Furthermore, there weren't any black insects around her. She then opened her mouth and said, "These things were discovered by you. But you forgot that these things were buried by I." "I?" The old man was shocked and blurted out, "Where did you come from, Taoist priest?" Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said with a smile, "You don't need to know where I come from. You only need to know that the things you discovered are mine. I'm going to take them away now." "Hee hee." The old man rolled his eyes and shook his head. "You're mistaken, Taoist priest. You obviously came after me. If these things belong to Taoist priest, why would Taoist priest bury them here? With Taoist priest's magical powers, there shouldn't be many people who can do anything to these things, right?" -4. Chapter 942. The old man's question was reasonable, and Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss for words. However, the reason could not be revealed to outsiders. Zhang Xiaohua laughed. "You old man, you're really unreasonable. If I said that this thing belongs to I, then it belongs to I. Why do you need a reason?" "That's right, Taoist priest is a person of the immortal Tao. Your powers are vast, and you're not someone I can compare to. However, everything under the heavens cannot be reasoned with. If Taoist priest can't produce any convincing evidence, then the old man did not say any threatening words, but the jade ruby in his hand tightened. Zhang Xiaohua scanned it with her divine sense. The jade ruby was also very lively. It should be an immortal Tao artifact, but she did not know what use it had. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "That's easy. Of course, I can give you a reason. However, you have to tell who are you?" The old man was stunned. After thinking for a while, he said, "Since Taoist priest is asking, how can I not tell you?" "All right." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she reached out and took out Chasing Dream. She did not form any seals, but threw it into the air. Then, she used her divine sense to control Chasing Dream according to the Sword of the World technique. Chasing Dream floated in the air. At first, it did not move. Then, it suddenly emitted a weak light. That light flashed and then extinguished. Chasing Dream suddenly moved. Like lightning, it shot towards the old man. The old man was looking at Zhang Xiaohua. When he saw her throw the small sword, he was already on guard. When he saw the small sword flying towards him, he was even more shocked. The fingers on his left hand moved nimbly as he chanted something. His right hand raised the jade ruby. A ball of light green light slowly flowed out from the jade ruby. However, before the light could shine, Chasing Dream had already shot in front of the old man. Chasing Dream was like lightning. When it arrived in front of the old man, it jumped back and retreated rapidly. It only stopped when it was 10 feet away. Then, it jumped up and down in the air. Whoosh! Only at this moment did the brilliance of the jade scepter open. It was like a wall that blocked the old man's body. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but smile when she saw that the imperial sword technique was indeed extraordinary. It was only her first time trying it out, But the speed of the chasing dream was several times faster than when she did not know the trick to controlling it in the past. Following that, the chasing dream trembled again and the brilliance reappeared. At this moment, two identical chasing dreams appeared out of thin air, one in front and one behind. They were just as fast as before. With two consecutive bangs, the light screen formed by the jade ruby swayed, and the old man's figure swayed along with it. The two chasing dreams intertwined and swooped down again. The old man's expression changed greatly. His left hand did not dare to be negligent. His fingers moved again as he chanted. Half of the black cloud above his head flew down, and the other half attacked Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not have any expression on her face. She reached into her bosom and took out a fire talisman. She threw it out. With a pong sound, the talisman exploded around the black bugs. Sparks rained down and covered the black bugs that were attacking them. However, when the fire dissipated, the black bugs were still flying in the air. Not many of them were burned to death by the fire. Io, could it be that these black bugs can only be destroyed by the delirium eye, or little black? When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, her expression changed. Of course, little black was not by her side, and the delirium eye did not have any movement. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua made a hand seal. Zhu Ming immediately turned around and rushed towards the black bugs. However, there were too many black bugs. Although Zhu Ming knocked a few of them to the ground, it was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Most of the black bugs ignored it and swarmed over. Zhang Xiaohua retreated a little when he saw the black worms approaching. He extended his hand and took out the beast head paperweight. This thing had mysteriously subdued the fire crows in the ruins of Huan. Perhaps it would be useful. As expected, the moment the beast head paperweight appeared, the black worms instinctively paused. However, under the command of the old man, they flew over again. However, their flying formation was no longer stable. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. Just like in the ruins of Huan, she channeled her vital energy into the beast head paperweight. However, this time, it was different from the ruins of Huan. The beast head paperweight did not suck in all the black bugs like it did in the past. Of course, it was not to no avail. As Zhang Xiaohua channeled her vital energy, the black bugs seemed to feel afraid. They did not charge forward but circled around a few feet in front of Zhang Xiaohua, rolling left and right. The old man was also stunned. He waved his left hand and hurried sounds came from his mouth. He seemed to be urging the black bugs, but the black bugs escaped his control and stopped. Unknowingly, the two of them were in a stalemate, or rather, they were both feeling awkward and helpless. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes turned. She waved her hand and Zhu Ming split into two and flew back into Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Then, Zhang Xiaohua flew back a few feet and laughed. How is it? Can this prove that this item belongs to I? When the old man heard this, he was stunned at first. Then, he revealed an unconcealable joy. Although he did not dare to loosen his grip on the jade ruby in his right hand, his left hand did what Zhang Xiaohua did. With a wave of his hand, the bugs that had turned into black fog flew back. When they reached the old man's side, they entrenched themselves on top of his head. Taoist priest, you are indeed skilled in the art of sword manipulation. I can't compare to you. Needless to say, just based on the fact that Taoist priest can control the flying sword inside, I know that this item must have been left behind by you. The old man said with a smile. He did not bother to distinguish whether the flying sword was taken out from the ground or not. Since we have identified the item, you can tell I. Who are you? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed her eyes and asked from afar. She did not move forward. She thought that the old man would beat around the bush. Who knew that the old man said loudly, I am Lei Hong from the Greenwood Palace. May I know who Taoist priest is? Then, he asked with a strange tone, could it be the spring equinox or hibernation awakening? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and pretended not to know. She said, what spring equinox or hibernation awakening? I am Panin. Panin? When Lei Hong heard this, he pondered for a moment as if he was thinking about something. Then, he asked, Senior Pan, forgive me for being slow-witted. Senior's cultivation method was not passed down by the fragrant religion. Moreover, Your supernatural powers are obviously superior to the fragrant religion's Nanjing Yi. May I know? Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and sneered. How can you know I's origin? I just don't know why you are around the Huan Su if you are from the Greenwood Palace. Lei Hong also smiled and said, Of course, I am here on the orders of the sect leader. I am here on official business. Zhang Xiaohua did not believe that this guy could go against Nanjing Yi and attack O Yin. Of course, he was not a good person. Maybe it was related to the sneak attack a few days ago. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua put away the beast head paperweight. She cupped her hands and said, In that case, you can continue with your business. I will leave first. After that, she made a gesture and used the art of riding wind. She went straight in one direction and disappeared in a moment. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua suddenly leave, Lei Hong did not dare to move. He still held the jade scepter and stood there quietly. After waiting for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, he commanded the black bug to circle around for a long time. He even checked the ground. After confirming that there was no trace of Zhang Xiaohua, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and muttered to himself in shock. Where did this immortal senior come from? He looks quite young. How can he be so powerful? Maybe he is not a hibernation awakening. This power. I am afraid that he is close to the few heavenly kings in the sect. Then, Lei Hong shook his head slightly. Fortunately, this senior is not from the incense cult. Otherwise, it would be difficult. However, even if it is difficult, what can he do? He has not returned to the Tenryu sect for a long time. I am afraid that the heavenly kings have trained many experts. It's a good thing that he doesn't have a way to restrain this soul puppet of mine. Otherwise, this old life of mine would have to die here today. This is a big piece of news. Let's wait for the incense cult's restriction to be lifted and send the news out quickly. Don't delay the sect leader's plan. As he spoke, Lei Hong took out a coarse black bottle from his bosom and kept the black soul puppet. Just as he was about to keep the bottle, he stopped and released a small soul puppet. Then, he held the jade scepter in his hand and used his qinggong to fly in another direction. After Lei Hong and Zhang Xiaohua left, there was only a gentle breeze blowing in this unremarkable place. No one knew what had happened here. 10 days later, on a mountain peak that reached the clouds, there was a sudden movement among the lush greenery. Between two trees, a ball of faint light flashed and a tall and thin man emerged from the ground. It was Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had a smile on his face as he looked at the beautiful scenery on the mountain peak. He smiled and said, As expected, there is also an 8 trigrams purple gold furnace on Kuanglu Peak. I have already gathered 17 alchemy furnaces. Only Jiuhua Peak has not been visited. I am curious, what is the use of these 18 alchemy furnaces? Ever since Zhang Xiaohua obtained the belt and other items that were hidden underground and failed to win the battle with Lei Hong, he went to the 19 peaks of the incense cult. Kuanglu Peak was the second to last one. As Zhang Xiaohua expected, there was a hidden alchemy room at the peak of each peak. There was an identical 8 trigrams purple gold furnace inside. However, when he saw the 17 identical alchemy furnaces in the belt, Zhang Xiaohua was even more suspicious. No matter how bored the seniors of the incense cult were, they would never place an alchemy furnace on each peak. Moreover, they were identical. What was the purpose of these alchemy furnaces? The 17 pill furnaces in the belt were placed together, and there was a faint connection between them. However, if one looked carefully, there was no trace of it. After sitting in the forest for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to go directly to Jiuhua Peak. For the past 10 days or so, he had concealed himself and practiced his flying technique while walking in the aroma cult. He also felt that it was quite tiring. Now that he had arrived at Kuanglu Peak, which was right next to Jinghai Lake, he couldn't help but have the thought of going to take a look. -4. Chapter 943. Jinghai Lake was the place where Zhang Xiaohua first entered the fragrant religion. It was quite a large lake, and it was also the place where people entered and exited the fragrant religion. Zhang Xiaohua's immortal cultivation had greatly improved, and her divine sense was also a lot stronger. Therefore, She also had the intention to explore Jinghai Lake. Forming a seal with her hand, Zhang Xiaohua's body flew up and broke through the sky. Her figure gradually dimmed, indicating that her flying technique and concealment technique had greatly improved. The flying technique was indeed powerful. Although Zhang Xiaohua had just entered the sect, it only took her the time to drink a cup of tea to arrive at Jinghai Lake. From afar, Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense. She only felt that the fluctuation of heaven and earth's origin energy above the lake was very strong. Especially above the lake, there were several fluctuations that swept across, and it was very chaotic. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and temporarily dispelled the idea of exploring the lake. She formed a seal and landed in the forest beside the lake. The forest was lush with branches and leaves, and the wind blew the leaves, creating a rustling sound. After Zhang Xiaohua landed, she did not use her qinggong. Instead, she walked step by step in the shade of the trees. The mottled sunlight penetrated through the forest, and it was particularly dazzling. Her feet stepped on the 1-foot-thick underbrush, and the rustling sound made Zhang Xiaohua recall many things. This was the place where Zhang Xiaohua first met the outstanding disciple of the Dan Repository Hall, Lu Lihong. It was also in the morning that Zhang Xiaohua saw the sanctimonious side of Lu Lihong. The dragon scale fruit that she obtained was also taken away by Lu Lihong. However, the things that happened after that were even more unimaginable. She met Lu Lihong again, fought with him, and was ambushed and killed by him. All of this happened in the span of a few months. At this moment, she was revisiting old memories. Where was the expert who deceived her in the past? He had already turned into a handful of soil in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Thinking about this, Zhang Xiaohua used her divine sense to check. In just a moment, she saw a lot of precious herbs in the forest. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua disdained to pick them. Although the herbs in the Yulon Grand Canyon were refined in the Shixin Peak, the remaining herbs were enough for Zhang Xiaohua to use. Although the herbs in the forest were good, they were far from what Zhang Xiaohua had, so naturally, it did not attract her interest. Just when Zhang Xiaohua casually glanced around, suddenly, an obscure fluctuation appeared, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared again. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. He focused his divine sense on the place just now, but there was no more movement. Could it be that I saw wrongly? Zhang Xiaohua thought with a frown. However, he still changed his direction and went to the place where the fluctuation came from. When he got closer, he found that the place where the fluctuation appeared was out of the forest, right next to the Jinghai Lake. Looking carefully, Zhang Xiaohua was surprised to find that it was the place where she and Chang Chang had set up camp. Could it be that there is something fishy underground? Zhang Xiaohua thought, and the obscure fluctuation suddenly appeared again. Just like before, it disappeared in a moment. Of course, this time, Zhang Xiaohua saw it clearly with her divine sense. It was a small bead under the ground not far away. Zhang Xiaohua used her divine sense to check the surroundings of the bead. After confirming that there was no danger, she walked over. The bead was not buried deep, and Zhang Xiaohua easily took it out. Looking at the gray bead in her hand, Zhang Xiaohua concentrated her divine sense and wanted to delve into it. However, the bead seemed to have a strange restriction. It did not isolate her divine sense, but when she tried to force her divine sense into it, the restriction shook violently, and a chaotic aura came out from within the bead. Suddenly, a sense of danger rose in Zhang Xiaohua's heart. Her expression changed, and with a flick of her wrist, she immediately threw the gray bead towards the Jinghai Lake. The bead shot out like an arrow from a bow. Even so, when the bead flew to the surface of the lake, the restriction on the surface of the lake was triggered. Before the restriction could activate, there was a weak flash of light, followed by a loud bang. The bead actually exploded on the surface of the lake, and the explosion caused huge waves to rise from the bottom of the lake. What is this? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. If the bead exploded in her hand, wouldn't she lose her life? No matter how light it was, she reckoned that she would not be able to keep her arm. Is this something that was forcefully buried? Or was it buried by someone else? Zhang Xiaohua was about to ponder, but there was another movement, and a weak divine sense swept over. Zhang Xiaohua's expression changed slightly, and a fierce look flashed in her eyes. She seemed to have an idea. She pinched a spell, and first, she escaped into the ground. After a short while, a few disciples wearing the uniform of the Wuming Hall hurriedly rushed over. Before they arrived, they saw a woman wearing tight clothes. Her head was wrapped tightly, and she was using her qing gong to stand high above the bushes. After the explosion, the surface of the lake returned to normal. However, the restriction on the surface of the lake was even more chaotic. How could these low-level disciples of the Wuming Hall know about this? They checked for a long time, but they did not find anything, so they had to go elsewhere. When these disciples went far away, the woman hiding in the bushes revealed herself. Her exposed eyes stared at the surface of the lake for a long time, as if she was thinking about something. At this time, the sound of leaves swaying could be heard from not far away. The woman raised her eyebrows, stood up, and looked for the source. Ren Xiaoyao. Before the woman could get close, she saw Zhang Xiaohua's exposed back. She blurted out, "You are indeed cunning. I have been chasing you for a long time, but I could not find any trace of you. If I did not have a sudden impulse to come to the Jinghai Lake to take a look, who would know that you were hiding here?" Zhang Xiaohua heard the sound behind her, and she pretended to be afraid. She used her qing gong, ethereal steps, and went into the depths of the forest. Ethereal steps? The woman seemed to be very familiar with ethereal steps. When Zhang Xiaohua used it, she saw through it. "I knew that there was something wrong with you. I did not expect your problem to be so big." Zhang Xiaohua did not look back. She controlled her speed, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, so that the woman behind her could not catch up. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the two of them went into the depths of the forest. The woman was so angry that she forgot to consider why she could not catch up to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua continued to run forward until she found a spacious area. Zhang Xiaohua stood under a tree with her arms crossed. She turned around and said with a smile, "Great Elder Jinggang, why are you chasing me?" When the woman heard this, she unconsciously stopped and changed her voice. She asked curiously, How did you know it was me?" As she spoke, she removed the cloth that was wrapped around her head, revealing her white hair and wrinkled face. "Ha ha ha," Zhang Xiaohua laughed. "In the entire fragrant cult, you are the only one who can't get along with me. Other than you, who else would care about a small character like me?" "It's that simple?" Jing Gang was stunned and asked in disbelief. "Of course, other than this, what else could it be? You changed your voice and clothes, but you didn't even let me see your face. If I didn't guess, how would I know?" Jing Gang slowly nodded and sneered. "Since you know it's me, you don't seem to be afraid. Why should I be afraid?" Zhang Xiaohua also sneered. "Lord Sect Leader knows how dissatisfied you are with me, so he followed your tone and sent me down the mountain. You went down the mountain without permission to kill me. Aren't you afraid of being punished by Lord Sect Leader?" "Punished?" Jing Gang laughed. "Let's not talk about the fact that I went down the mountain through a secret passage. Jingyi only knows that I went into seclusion to cultivate and doesn't know that I went down the mountain. Even if she knew, I would have killed you long ago. What else can she say? It's just a few words of punishment. Do you think I would abandon the decades of relationship between us for a mere disciple?" Zhang Xiaohua held her chin and didn't say anything. Then she heard Jing Gang say, "Actually, I was a bit anxious that day. If you hadn't found Emo Qingshan's relics and I hadn't listened to Mei Suyan's words, I would have lost my mind and only wanted to kill you to avenge Zhuochuan. I lost Jing Yi's face in Emo Qian's palace. Do you think I wouldn't have killed you on Lingering Fragrance Peak?" "But," Zhang Xiaohua said thoughtfully, "you don't have evidence that I killed you, Zhuochuan. How do you know that I killed her?" "Evidence? It's just something from the legends. As long as you have the slightest chance, this old woman will kill you and kill all the people who can kill Zhuokun. The real murderer will also be killed by this old woman," Jing Gang said with a sneer. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. "I'd rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one person go. Great Elder, what a good plan." Jing Gang, kill people. Do I still need to plan?" Jing Gang said proudly. "That's true." Zhang Xiaohua put down her hand and said, "There's an old proverb that says those who kill will be killed by others. I don't know if Great Elder has heard of it." Ha ha ha. Jing Gang laughed. I have heard of it, but I don't understand. Ren Xiaoyao, you've said so much. You can die now. As she spoke, Jing Gang stretched out her hand and a long sword came out of its scabbard. Wait a moment. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand. Doesn't Great Elder want to know whether I killed Yu Zhuochuan or not? There's no difference whether you killed her or not. It won't be too late to tell me after you die. Is that so? Zhang Xiaohua said as he reached out his hand and took out something from his bosom. When she saw the item in Zhang Xiaohua's hand, Jing Gang's eyes widened. She scolded angrily. Ren Xiaoyao, you brat, you actually got the purple phoenix hairpin. Zhuochuan was indeed killed by you. Give me your life. As she spoke, she raised her long sword. It was very similar to Shi Mujuan's sword. She was going to stab Zhang Xiaohua. That's not all. Zhang Xiaohua sneered and took out another purple phoenix hairpin from his bosom. He held both purple phoenix hairpins in his hands and waved them in the air a few times. He smiled and said, Your two precious disciples have become ghosts in my hands. I'm afraid you will follow in their footsteps. Yu Zhuochuan left early, and I'm afraid she couldn't wait for you. Shi Mujuan, on the other hand, is probably still waiting for you. -4. Chapter 944. Mujuan? When Nun Jinggang saw the two identical purple phoenix hairpins in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, the shock on her face could no longer be described with words. She might have suspected that Yu Zhuochuan had died in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, but that was merely a suspicion. It was merely based on a woman's intuition. In fact, she herself was half convinced. However, she had never thought that Shi Mujuan would die in Zhang Xiaohua's hands. She had never thought that this would happen. Furthermore, Nun Jinggang had left the mountain alone to hunt down Zhang Xiaohua. Apart from her extreme hatred for Zhang Xiaohua, she also felt helpless. Ever since Shi Mujuan had left the mountain to train, he had never returned. Nun Jinggang's other disciples also had their own matters to attend to. They were all within Nun Jingyi's field of vision and could not be randomly assigned. Nun Jinggang had no choice but to leave the mountain herself. Otherwise, she would have sent Shi Mujuan over. This was because, in her heart, Zhang Xiaohua was no match for Shi Mujuan at all. However, when she heard Zhang Xiaohua say that Shi Mujuan had been killed by her, Nun Jinggang could not believe her ears. However, the two purple phoenix hairpins in Zhang Xiaohua's hands were real. They had been bestowed upon Nun Jinggang by the previous sect master after she had received the inheritance. They had accompanied Nun Jinggang for many years and had only been given to Yu Zhuochuan and Shi Mujuan later on. Even without using her divine sense, Nun Jinggang could tell with her naked eyes that these were genuine purple phoenix hairpins. Her two precious disciples would never have casually disposed of such precious items. The only possibility for these purple phoenix hairpins to fall into Zhang Xiaohua's hands was that the two of them had really died in Zhang Xiaohua's hands. At this moment, Nun Jinggang could no longer be bothered to consider the reason behind her two disciples' deaths. She formed a seal with her left hand, and Zhang Xiaohua felt the purple phoenix hairpin in her hand move slightly as if it was about to leave her hand. Oh no, this purple phoenix hairpin has actually been refined by Jinggang. Zhang Xiaohua's mind raced. She swept the hairpin with her divine sense and put it into her purse. Seeing that the purple phoenix hairpin had suddenly disappeared and that she could no longer feel it, Nun Jinggang was even more shocked. Then, a trace of understanding flashed through her eyes. You're from the Tenryu sect? Zhang Xiaohua shook his head. He had encountered such questions countless times. Only Lei Hong from the Greenwood Palace didn't ask him if he was from the Tenryu sect a few days ago. I don't care if you're from the Tenryu sect or not. After I kill you to avenge my two disciples, I'll settle the score with that bitch Xixia. I'd like to see how Jingyi will protect her. Nun Jinggang gritted her teeth as she spoke. She waved the long sword in her hand, and her figure rose from the ground. She was going to stab the space between Zhang Xiaohua's eyebrows. Hearing Nun Jinggang call Meng a bitch, Zhang Xiaohua was furious. Her eyes narrowed, and she reached out to take out Chasing Dream. Nun Jinggang's figure danced in the air. Her sword was very charming, and it attracted all of Zhang Xiaohua's attention. It was as if only the tip of Nun Jinggang's sword was the most beautiful color in the entire world. She could only stand up and face it head-on. That was the only choice at this moment. This was the move that Shi Mujuan had used before. However, in Nun Jinggang's hands, its power had increased greatly. Putting aside the fact that Nun Jinggang's power had increased, just looking at the indescribable power of this move in her hands, it was definitely not something that a man like Shi Mujuan could use. Perhaps this shocking sword was created by the fragrant religion specifically for women. How could Zhang Xiaohua's mind be attracted by this? With that thought in mind, Chasing Dream in his hand leaped forward to meet the attack. Flying sword? Nun Jinggang almost blurted out. However, she did not dare to be careless. The sword in her left hand did not change. Instead, she reached into her clothes and took out a jade talisman. She crushed it, and a faint white light immediately flashed. It gradually formed a protective light shield around her. However, Chasing Dream was not fast at first. When the protective light shield appeared, it immediately trembled and split into two identical small swords. At the same time, it sped up and flew towards Nun Jinggang's left and right sides. Before Nun Jinggang's protective light shield could be formed. When Nun Jinggang saw this, she could not help but be shocked. She finally understood Zhang Xiaohua's power. However, she was not nervous. She formed a hand seal and two weak divine senses appeared. One on the left and one on the right. They flew towards Zhang Xiaohua's flying swords. Zhang Xiaohua's divine senses had already covered the entire area. When he saw Nun Jinggang's weak divine senses, he could not help but laugh. However, when he saw that her divine senses could split into two, he was curious. Hence, he used one of the divine senses to change the direction of the two flying swords. One from the top and the other from the bottom, they pierced towards Nun Jinggang's body. However, Nun Jinggang's two divine senses were also magical. Like maggots, they followed the changes in the two flying swords and wrapped around them with great agility. At the same time, the long sword in Nun Jinggang's left hand was in front of Zhang Xiaohua's face. Even though he was facing Nun Jinggang, Zhang Xiaohua did not look as pathetic as when he faced Shi Mujuan. The tip of the long sword was like a dazzling meteor that was about to land on Zhang Xiaohua's face. Zhang Xiaohua immediately moved. He did not hide underground. Instead, he formed a hand seal that he had prepared beforehand. A faint light red light appeared in midair and blocked the tip of Nun Jinggang's sword. However, with a soft poof, the light red light did not stop the tip of the sword for long. It was pierced through by Nun Jinggang's long sword. The tip of the sword pierced through the light and continued to land on Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Nun Jinggang sneered, "It's just the Tenryu sect's insignificant technique. How can it block my fragrant sect's ultimate technique?" "Is that so?" Zhang Xiaohua replied with a smile. Then, he leaped into the air and flew into the sky. Levitation technique? Nun Jinggang was astonished once again, but the long sword in her hand missed its target. Even though her qinggong was good and her swordsmanship was amazing, she could not levitate. How could she catch up to Zhang Xiaohua? By the time Zhang Xiaohua rose into the air, the two chasing dreams controlled by his divine sense were already in front of Jinggang Shirtai. Although Jinggang Shirtai's divine sense was weak, her speed was not slower than Zhang Xiaohua's. Moreover, Jinggang Shirtai seemed to have grasped the incense cult's immortal Dao secret art. She was actually able to block Zhang Xiaohua's flying sword. While both of their divine senses were locked in a stalemate, Nun Jinggang's light barrier formed around her body. Nun Jinggang's face had a trace of tranquility. "I didn't expect you to know the levitation technique. This is out of my expectations." When Nun Jinggang saw Zhang Xiaohua floating in the air, she kept her long sword and took out a palm-sized triangular object. She sneered, "It's a pity that I didn't know you were from the Tenryu sect. I came out in a hurry and didn't bring any weapons. However, this Sangharama plate is enough to take your life." Nun Jinggang was arrogant. Zhang Xiaohua stood in the air and sneered, "Let's try it then." As he spoke, he urged his divine sense. Two chasing dreams swirled around Nun Jinggang's body and rapidly pierced towards her. When Nun Jinggang saw this, she didn't reply. She silently chanted an incantation in her heart. Her left hand also formed a seal. The two strands of divine sense danced in the air in an attempt to block the flying swords. Zhang Xiaohua's face was expressionless, but he sincerely wanted to see the results of his 10 days of cultivation. He made another hand seal, and the two flying swords trembled again. Suddenly, there was a moment of absent-mindedness, and 4 identical flying swords appeared. They circled around and stabbed toward Jinggang Shirtai's body. Nun Jinggang's expression changed slightly. She stopped chanting the incantation, and immediately, another divine sense appeared and wrapped around one of the flying swords. Fortunately, Nun Jinggang can only split 3 divine senses. If she split 4, wouldn't my flying swords be blocked by her? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. He had been cultivating the imperial sword technique and had improved in the past few days. He could split the chasing dreams into 4. Although there was still a long way to go before he could reach 10,000 swords, it was still a fundamental change. If he cultivated according to this method, he could definitely reach the realm of 10,000 swords. At this moment, when she saw that she could only split 3 divine senses and couldn't contend against Zhang Xiaohua's 4 flying swords, Nun Jinggang immediately changed her strategy. She used the 3 divine senses to guard and only waited for Zhang Xiaohua's flying swords to pierce through before attacking and blocking the flying swords. In the past, Zhang Xiaohua had only used flying swords to deal with martial artists. He had never seen immortals use their divine sense to fight with flying swords. For a moment, he was at a loss and did not know how to deal with it. He could only use his divine sense to drive the flying swords. Like a fly, it flew towards Shirtai Jinggang's body, randomly greeting her. After a few more minutes, the Sambarama plate in Nun Jinggang's hand gradually glowed. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to hesitate any longer. He tossed his hand, and the dragon binding hoop flew out. The moment the dragon binding hoop was tossed out, it expanded and turned into a huge hoop that wrapped around Nun Jinggang's body. Seeing how powerful the dragon binding hoop was, Nun Jinggang calmed down. Her left hand stopped moving, and she took out a small seal from her chest. She raised her hand and threw it into the air. It was a small seal. Following that, Nun Jinggang took out a piece of primeval stone from her chest and pointed at it. The primeval stone flew onto the seal, and the seal suddenly expanded. It also flew up and blocked Nun Jinggang's head. The dragon binding hoop flew onto the seal but couldn't wrap around it anymore. My God. So this is because you didn't bring a suitable artifact? Seeing that Nun Jinggang took out an unknown seal and used a primeval stone to control it, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but sneer. If you took a suitable artifact, how could I survive? Nun Jinggang is being honest. Zhang Xiaohua counted the artifacts in his bag and didn't feel that there was anything worth using. He could only focus on controlling the flying swords and piercing them towards Nun Jinggang's body. Zhang Xiaohua's strategy was effective. He was controlling 4 flying swords, while Nun Jinggang only had 3 divine senses. It was precisely because of the advantage in numbers that Zhang Xiaohua gained. Under Zhang Xiaohua's wholehearted control, chasing dreams stabbed into Nun Jinggang's body with a soft bang in just a short moment. -4. Chapter 945. The chasing dream dagger stabbed into Nun Jinggang's body like a bolt of lightning. This time, it was different from when Zhang Xiaohua used the dagger to fight against the mysterious bronze-masked old man. It was also different from when she fought against Shimujuan. The dagger's power was not on the same level. When the chasing dream dagger stabbed into Nun Jinggang's body, there was a flash of white light. The dagger was blocked and the light dimmed. This caused Nun Jinggang's expression to change. Even Zhang Xiaohua's face revealed a trace of a smile. Although the chasing dream was agile when fighting against the bronze-masked old man, it was easy for the old man to catch it. When it encountered Shimujuan, the chasing dream could not win against the long sword in his hand. It was only now that Zhang Xiaohua had learned the true art of sword manipulation. Only then did she know how domineering the immortal flying sword was. Just one slash was enough to dim Nun Jinggang's protective light shield by 30%. If she continued in a spurt of energy, wouldn't she succeed with just 3 or 4 slashes? Zhang Xiaohua was wild with joy. On one hand, She activated the dragon binding hoop, and on the other, she activated 4 more sword lights. She continuously stabbed in from all directions. On the other hand, when she saw that 30% of her defensive light shield had been pierced, she could not help but panic. She hastened the activation of the Sangharama disc in her hand. As a result, the light on the Sangharama disc became even brighter. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she frowned. Her divine sense discovered that there was not much qi of heaven and earth in the surroundings. She knew that once this Dharma artifact was activated, there would definitely be a different movement. After thinking for a moment, she formed a hand seal and her figure rapidly rushed towards Nun Jinggang. She also took out the nameless dagger in her hand. Nun Jinggang was stunned when she saw Zhang Xiaohua suddenly go against common sense and actually get close to her. However, when she saw Zhang Xiaohua's flying speed, how was this the levitation technique she remembered? She unconsciously clenched her teeth. With a piyub sound, she spat out a mouthful of essence blood onto the Sangharama disc in her hand. The Sangharama disc absorbed the essence blood and shone resplendently. Soon after, a resounding sound was heard. Immediately, a large cluster of blue light appeared on the Sangharama disc. That light rose into the air. With a turn, it rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua, who was already very close to it. And where the light rolled, there was the sound of waves crashing of the shore. In Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, it was different. The blue light had turned into a huge wave, covering the sky and earth as it came crashing down on him. It was not even 3 feet away from his head, but he could already feel the power of the wave. The power of the wave was different from the power of Zhang Xiaohua's Prajna heavy sword. It was a kind of simulation of qi of heaven and earth. It had a feeling that the world was filled with qi of heaven and earth, and there was nowhere to escape to. This, Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He had experienced this feeling in the weak water array. There was no better way to break it. At this time, when he saw it again, he immediately turned around and flew away. However, the blue wave did not give up. It chased after Zhang Xiaohua and rushed into the air. Zhang Xiaohua's flying technique could not be said to be fast, but the wave of qi of heaven and earth was even faster. With a hua sound, it rushed behind Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be slow. He turned around and dodged the wave. A few water droplets splashed past and hit Zhang Xiaohua's arm. With a few qi-la sounds, Zhang Xiaohua's sleeve was pierced, and the water droplets hit Zhang Xiaohua's simple robe. A wave of bone-piercing pain came from his arm, and Zhang Xiaohua almost grimaced. What kind of magic weapon is this? It's clearly a wave of water. How can there be water droplets? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Could it be that this wave of water is also real? Zhang Xiaohua's guess was right. There were indeed a few drops of primordial water hidden in the Sangharama plate. Each drop had the power of 1,000 caddies. The waves of primordial water were also very powerful. Otherwise, Jinggang Nun would not have to fiddle with the Sangharama plate for so long. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was about to use the levitation spell to escape, Jinggang Nun panicked. She wanted to chase after him, but then she came to a realization. She stood there steadily and focused on controlling the Sangharama plate. Zhang Xiaohua flew more than 10 feet away and temporarily escaped the attack of the wave. He stood in the air with an uncertain expression. He could escape, but if he did, what would happen to his dream? Not to mention Jinggang Nun's torture, even Jingyi Nun might not let him go. However, if he didn't escape, he wouldn't be able to do anything to Jinggang Nun. This Sangharama plate. The attack was too strange. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to deal with it. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was strong. He could still control Chu Ming within 10 feet. The 4 Chu Ming continued to attack Jingyi Nun. Jingyi Nun's divine sense was unable to cope with the attacks, and in a moment of carelessness, she was stabbed by Chu Ming again. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was able to control the flying sword from such a distance, Jingyi Nun's face turned gloomy. Needless to say, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was much stronger than hers. Seeing that her defense was about to collapse, Jingyi Nun moved the Sangharama plate. A ray of light shot out from the plate and chased after Chu Ming. When the ray of light reached Chu Ming, it turned into a wave and slammed down. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense immediately felt the unparalleled power from Chu Ming. He couldn't help but be alarmed. He hurriedly controlled the small sword and flew back. The wave of light couldn't catch up to the small sword, so it circled around Jing Gang's body to prevent the flying sword from attacking again. Chu Ming transformed into 4 parts and floated in the air restlessly. Zhang Xiaohua's expression was extremely ugly. His arms had the strength of 10,000 jin, and he looked very impressive with the great wisdom sword in his hand. However, he had painstakingly tempered his bones and obtained the great wisdom sword by chance. Yet, all of this couldn't compare to the other party's magic tool. Furthermore, he knew that Jing Gang's cultivation was inferior to his. Not to mention her divine sense, she didn't even know the levitation technique. However, the other party's strange magic tool was able to ignore this difference. At this moment, only the dragon binding hoop was still in the air. It was in a deadlock with Jing Gang's small seal. However, it was obvious that the small seal was controlled by Jing Gang's martial arts techniques. It didn't need to expend his true energy. What should I do now? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. He was a little depressed. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand and Chu Ming flew back to his left hand. He then reached out with his right hand and took out a small mirror. It was the small mirror that he had used to kill Shimujuan and block the huge blade in the metal array. Then, Zhang Xiaohua held the mirror with both hands. He naturally threw Chu Ming to the ground. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had taken out a new magic tool, Jing Gang naturally became more cautious. However, when she saw that it was a small mirror from afar, she couldn't help but be stunned. Hence, even Zhang Xiaohua's action of throwing away the flying sword was due to carelessness. She pointed her finger, and the brilliance that flew out of the Sangharama plate intensified. The sound of water within the brilliance surged, waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to attack. Zhang Xiaohua's face was as calm as still water. He circulated his true energy and poured it into the small mirror. He didn't know how to use this magic tool and could only use it according to his previous experience. However, after pouring his true energy into the small mirror for a long time, there was still no change. Of course, this was within Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. However, Jing Gang didn't know. She didn't know what was so special about Zhang Xiaohua's magic tool. When she saw that Zhang Xiaohua was rushing towards her with the small mirror in hand, she focused all her attention and prepared for battle. She gathered all the brilliance of the Sangharama plate in front of her chest and waved it forward, rushing towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's expression didn't change when he saw the huge wave crashing towards him. He raised the small mirror and faced it head-on. However, when the huge wave approached the small mirror, there was no change. Seeing this, Jing Gang was even more alarmed. She was afraid that the small mirror would unleash a powerful attack. However, when the huge wave came into contact with the small mirror, Jing Gang felt an immense sense of danger. This, without waiting for Jing Gang to make a move. 4 identical dream-chasing swords suddenly appeared on her back and stabbed into her back at the same time. Zhang Xiaohua's face was also filled with joy. He retreated and flew back to where he came from. It turned out that when Zhang Xiaohua threw Zhu Ming on the ground, he had already used his divine sense to go around the range of Jing Gang Shirtai's divine sense and stealthily arrived behind Jing Gang Shirtai. Taking out the small mirror and holding it with both hands was just to attract Jing Gang Shirtai's attention to conceal Zhu Ming's movements. As expected, Jing Gang Shirtai had been tricked. Only when Zhu Ming had split into 4 did she notice. However, it was already too late. No matter how fast Jing Gang Shirtai's divine sense was, it was impossible for her to block the flying swords. The jade talisman that Jing Gang Shirtai had crushed earlier had already been pierced twice by Zhu Ming. 2 of the 4 flying swords had already pierced through the light shield. When the light was extinguished, the other 2 flying swords had already pierced through Jing Gang Shirtai's back. Jing Gang was shocked, but she didn't have any other choice. However, there was no despair in her voice. Sure enough, when the flying swords stabbed into Jing Gang's back, they didn't pierce through. It turned out that it wasn't only Zhang Xiaohua who had a protective robe. How could the fragrant cult's great elder not have a personal protective robe? However, just as Jing Gang heaved a sigh of relief, Zhu Ming, who was sticking to her back, lifted the tip of the sword. It was just like how Zhang Xiaohua used to hold Zhu Ming, or how she used to control the sword. With a woot sound, the sword suddenly stabbed towards Jing Gang's neck from a strange angle. The flying sword's angle was very tricky and its speed was very fast. Nun Jinggang had just released her spiritual sense to wrap around the other flying sword when this fatal flying sword easily bypassed her spiritual sense. No, Jinggang's eyes were about to crack. Soon after, a look of hatred appeared on her face. Just before Zhu Ming pierced the back of her neck, she spat out another mouthful of essence blood and desperately activated the Sangharama plate. The surging waves howled as they pounced toward Zhang Xiaohua. -4. Chapter 946. Zhang Xiaohua used the small mirror to attract Nun Jinggang's attention. Once the flying sword pierced Nun Jinggang's back, he would immediately retreat. It was a pity that he did not expect Nun Jinggang to have a defense close to her. This sword did not succeed, and he had no choice but to use his original move. In this moment of delay, he lost the opportunity and was unable to completely escape the area of the wave. What made Zhang Xiaohua even more shocked was that Nun Jinggang was also a powerful character. When she saw that the situation was not going well, she actually had the thought of dying together with Zhu Ming. She did not care about Zhu Ming, who was piercing the back of her neck. Instead, she spat out a mouthful of essence blood and used all her might to activate the Sangharama plate. At this moment, the monstrous wave was even bigger and the force contained in the water was also greater. Zhang Xiaohua's intuition told him that if the wave hit him, wouldn't he be smashed into meat paste? However, at this moment, the wave was already right in front of him. It was too late for him to escape. Regardless of whether it was the flying technique or the earth escape technique, they were all useless. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohua could only raise the small mirror and pour all the vital energy in his body into it. The small mirror did not change at all under the infusion of vital energy. When the wave formed by the Xiantian primordial water hit the small mirror for about 3 inches, a ball of light blue light suddenly rose up. The color of the light was similar to the color of the wave. Following the appearance of the light, a huge suction force appeared from the small mirror and pulled the vital energy that Zhang Xiaohua poured into it. Not only that, the entire small mirror was like a bottomless pit as it continuously sucked in the vital energy in Zhang Xiaohua's body. In just a moment, the vital energy that Zhang Xiaohua had obtained in the Huan Su was completely sucked dry by the small mirror. Zhang Xiaohua's meridians, which had been forcefully absorbed by the true qi, had ruptured in many places. A heart-wrenching pain was transmitted into Zhang Xiaohua's mind, and he could not help but grit his teeth. After absorbing all of Zhang Xiaohua's zhenqi, the blue brilliance of the small mirror became even more dazzling. With a loud clang, the blue brilliance soared into the sky and collided with the monstrous waves. Then, just like a real wave, with a wallet sound, Zhang Xiaohua felt a tremor in her hand. An incomparably huge force was transmitted from her hand. Gritting her teeth, Zhang Xiaohua exerted all of her strength in both hands and desperately pushed upwards. That blue brilliance actually resisted the monstrous waves. It was as if the monstrous waves had collided with an incomparably hard shore. Just as the huge wave flowed backwards, Zhang Xiaohua's chasing dream, which was stabbing towards the back of Abbess Jinggang's neck, was also inserted as expected. However, at this moment, Jinggang Nun no longer paid attention to the flying sword behind her. She just opened her eyes wide and looked at the small mirror in Zhang Xiaohua's hand. She said in disbelief, "How Tian mirror? How did it become?" Before she could finish her sentence, Chasing Dream had already pierced through her neck, and she could no longer say another word. When Jinggang Nun fell to the ground, her eyes were still wide open. It was unknown whether she was unwilling to die like this, or she could not believe what she had just seen. In short, the palace master of the Ruijin Palace of the Spreading Incense Cult, the great elder of the Spreading Incense Cult, Jinggang Nun, was killed on the spot by Zhang Xiaohua, who had no reputation in the pugilistic world. Without Jinggang Nun's control, the brilliance of the Sangharama plate was immediately extinguished. The monstrous waves instantly rolled back, and with the sound of water, they were sucked into the Sangharama plate. The brilliance of the small mirror in Zhang Xiaohua's hand was instantly retracted, and it returned to its normal state. The small seal on top of Jinggang Nun's head fell to the ground silently. With a plop, as Jinggang Nun fell to the ground, Zhang Xiaohua also sat on the ground. This battle of life and death could be said to have exhausted him. Although it was only a short battle, Zhang Xiaohua truly understood that the battle of immortal Tao was not only a battle of cultivation, but also a battle of spells and weapons. Most importantly, it was a battle of wits. Sitting on the ground, Zhang Xiaohua took out a vitality stone. As he absorbed the vitality to replenish his vital qi, he recalled the battle with lingering fear in his heart. Early on, during the battle with Shimujuan, Zhang Xiaohua gradually understood the cruelty of the battle of immortal Tao. Then, during the probing battle with Lei Hong, he gradually understood the essence of the battle of wits. Although Lei Hong's cultivation was not only 1 star lower than Zhang Xiaohua's, it was difficult for Zhang Xiaohua to successfully kill a spiritual puppet without injuring himself without using the delusion breaker Dharma Eye. Therefore, when he encountered Jinggang Nun's pursuit this time, Zhang Xiaohua changed his previous battle strategy right from the start. In the past, when Zhang Xiaohua made a move, he would test out his Dharma artifacts one by one. He would even throw out jade talismans one by one. Of course, this was useful to a certain extent, but it also indirectly exposed his strength and the Dharma artifacts he had, allowing his opponent to be fully prepared. Therefore, when Zhang Xiaohua heard that Jinggang Nun did not bring any handy weapons this time, he muttered in his heart. Needless to say, Jinggang Nun was Shimujuan and Yuzhuachuan's master. Whatever Shimujuan had, Jinggang Nun would definitely have. She definitely had more defensive jade talismans than Shimujuan, and they were of a higher level. If Zhang Xiaohua used the offensive jade talismans like before, Jinggang Nun would definitely have more defensive jade talismans and even better defensive techniques. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua did not use any jade talismans, regardless of whether they were offensive or defensive. This caused Jinggang Nun to misunderstand that Zhang Xiaohua did not have any jade talismans. Therefore, after crushing 1 defensive jade talisman, Jinggang Nun did not crush a second one. Also, when Zhang Xiaohua started to drive the flying sword, she used both her divine sense and spells. This also caused Jinggang Nun to misunderstand that Zhang Xiaohua's flying sword could only be driven by the spells of her fingers. When Zhang Xiaohua threw Zhu Ming on the ground and raised the small mirror with both hands, she did not notice where Zhu Ming went. These were all things that Zhang Xiaohua had considered when the fight started. Especially after Zhu Ming broke through 30% of Jinggang's defense with 1 sword. Zhang Xiaohua knew that this plan had a chance of success. Therefore, he prepared to carry it out. Step by step, according to his plan, he made Jinggang Nun fall into his trap. Of course, this plan was very shallow. As long as Jinggang Nun crushed another defensive jade talisman, Zhang Xiaohua might have to flee. This was related to Zhang Xiaohua's experience in fighting immortals, and more importantly, to Jinggang Nun's lack of experience in fighting immortals. Zhang Xiaohua did not use the defensive jade talisman and the crimson spirit protection because he wanted Jinggang Nun to forget about defense. In the end, Jinggang Nun really forgot. However, Zhang Xiaohua's plan was flawless, but he still ignored Jinggang Nun's madness and her determination to destroy everything. If Zhang Xiaohua did not have the crimson spirit protection and the defensive light shield, the giant wave of the Sangharama plate would definitely take Zhang Xiaohua's life. Fortunately, the so-called Hao Tian mirror in Zhang Xiaohua's hand could actually reflect the giant wave. If not, even if Zhang Xiaohua stabbed Jinggang Nun to death, he would also die under the Sangharama plate. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua had already replenished a portion of his vital qi. When he fought with Jinggang Nun just now, although there was no sound, there was still some light from the celestial device. It was possible that the patrolling disciples of Wuming Hall would discover it. It was not good to stay here for long. Zhang Xiaohua kept the small mirror, dragon binding hoop, and chasing dream. Then, he picked up the Sangharama plate and the small seal on the ground and looked at them with interest. After that, he threw them into his belt. As for Jinggang Nun's corpse, it was lying on the ground. Her eyes were wide open, making Zhang Xiaohua feel uncomfortable. Great Elder Jinggang, Perhaps it was because of your indulgence that led to today's outcome. If it was not because of your protection, Yu Zhuochuan would not have met me and would not have asked me about the matter between Zhang Pinger and me. Even if you wanted my life, I would not have killed Yu Zhuochuan. As for Shi Mujuan, this fellow was not wronged. He actually wanted to snatch my dream. It was already a blessing that I did not kill him. He actually wanted to kill me? Who do you think I should blame? You are even better. You did not even have evidence that I killed him. You wanted to take my life just based on a sentence from someone else. You even did it in front of His Excellency the Hierarch. Speaking of which, it is funny. You are the great elder of the Hierarch. You have countless methods to take my life. However, you have a guilty conscience and do not dare to make things difficult for me in public. That is why you use such methods behind my back. Sigh, it is a pity that you personally chased me for more than 10 days. In the end, you still died in my hands. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Nun Jinggang's corpse. Endless feelings of karma welled up in her heart. After a moment, she sighed. She stretched out her hand, wanting to throw out a fire talisman. However, just as she was about to throw it out, she subconsciously paused. She thought to herself, this Nun Jinggang is not Shi Mujuan or Yu Zhuochuan. If they die, they die. If they go missing, then they go missing. Nun Jingyi might not care too much about them. However, Nun Jinggang is a well-known figure in the cult of fragrance. She is His Excellency the Hierarch's great senior sister. How could Nun Jingyi not look for her? If I don't have her corpse, Nun Jingyi will definitely suspect me. After all, I was the only one who had a conflict with Nun Jinggang in Emotian's palace. It was very disadvantageous for me. If I keep Abish Jinggang's corpse, Abish Jingyi will know at a glance that it was done by someone from the immortal Tao. Hehe, the first thing she would think of would be the Heavenly Dragon sect. Why would she think of a nobody like me? With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua chuckled. She took out the Sangarama plate and the small seal from her waist and casually threw them on the ground. She looked around to make sure there were no loopholes. She then formed a hand seal and prepared to fly away. However, just as he flew out 100 feet, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something and turned around to return. Zhang Xiaohua landed on the ground and kept the small seal and the Sangarama plate in her belt. Then, she released her divine sense and scanned Nun Jinggang's body. She then took out the nameless short sword and slashed it across Nun Jinggang's chest. Immediately, several jade talismans and 2 jade slips slipped out from the slit in her clothes. There are more chapters. -4. Chapter 947. Several days later, Zhang Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged on the towering Jiuhua Peak. His eyes were looking ahead at the seemingly endless sea of clouds and the red-crowned cranes that occasionally rushed out from the clouds. His eyes were filled with a smile. Ever since he killed Jinggang Shirtai, Zhang Xiaohua immediately fled. He first used a flying technique to fly to the faraway Yinluo Peak. He showed himself at Yinluo Peak and used Emo Xian Palace's guardian disciple token. Accompanied by a few Heaven and Earth Hall disciples, he asked a few questions and saw the scenery of Yinluo Peak. After resting for half a day, he left the mountain under the respectful escort of those disciples. Afterwards, Zhang Xiaohua did not stop and ran to a few nearby peaks. It was really a coincidence that he met the Tenryu sect's disciple that he saw outside Huansu. Zhang Xiaohua took advantage of that disciple's unpreparedness and suddenly stopped him. He wanted to use Bewitching Finger to make that disciple speak the truth. However, that disciple seemed to have received some special training. He spoke hesitantly and was not very clear. Not to mention the situation of the Tenryu sect and the Tenryu sect, he couldn't even ask anything about the Tenryu sect itself. Instead, he knew the situation of the other sects in the Tenryu sect and did not hide anything. This made Zhang Xiaohua not know whether to laugh or cry. He was just looking for the spies of the other sects in the Tenryu sect. As a result, it could be said that he hit the mark by a fluke and knew quite a lot. It turned out that other than the Tenryu sect had the most spies in the Tenryu sect. Moreover, from what this disciple of the Tenryu sect had said, that mysterious power had been in the Tenryu sect for a long time. Over the years, the number of spies that had infiltrated the Tenryu sect was second only to the Tenryu sect. Of course, other than the two sects that Zhang Xiaohua already knew, the Dalan Temple, the Misty School, the Righteous Alliance, and other sects that had some reputation in Jianghu had more or less sent people to the Tenryu sect. This situation was not only known by this disciple of the Tenryu sect, but also by Imo Shuigong. A few years ago, the head of the Tenryu sect had ordered the Ruijin Temple to encircle and annihilate the spies on a large scale. However, these spies were like weeds on the plains. After the encirclement and annihilation, they rose up again in just a few years. After the encirclement and annihilation, the Tenryu sect stopped. In any case, the Tenryu sect had similar spies in the other sections. These spies only passed on information to the outside world and didn't do anything big. The other sects also turned a blind eye to them. After knowing this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a bit apprehensive. The things he had done were all sensational, especially when he killed Nun Jinggang. If it was an ordinary Tenryu sect spy, they definitely wouldn't make a move. He didn't know if he could shift the blame to the Tenryu sect. However, although that disciple didn't mention the leader of the Tenryu sect spies in the incense cult, when he thought about what Lei Hong from the Greenwood Palace said, there was an 80 to 90% chance that it was him. Moreover, he had actually tried to harm Mo Yin. Letting him take the blame could be considered a light punishment. Afterwards, Zhang Xiaohua followed the disciple's words and walked through several mountain peaks, searching for all the people he thought were spies. With Zhang Xiaohua's immortal Dao concealment technique, no one was able to find any trace of him. Under the influence of Bewitching Finger, those disciples said a few more things. These things didn't deviate from the Tenryu sect's words, but they were more detailed. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Jiuhua Peak with the last 8 trigrams violet gold furnace in his mind. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was sitting at the top of Jiuhua Peak and using his divine sense to sense the 18 8 trigrams violet gold furnaces in his belt that had a mysterious connection. He thought to himself, now that I've obtained all of the 8 trigrams violet gold furnaces and placed them together, nothing strange has happened. I've also carefully examined all of the furnaces. They're all exactly the same. Even the refinement chants on the inner walls are the same. Moreover, just now, I refined all of the 8 trigrams violet gold furnaces again and spat out the last of my true life origin. However, I only gained a faint connection with them. I only know that these 18 pill furnaces must have a special use, but I don't know what they're used for. Sigh, forget it. The time hasn't come yet. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and took out a jade slip from his pocket. This jade slip was from Nun Jinggang. When Zhang Xiaohua was about to leave, he suddenly remembered that he had 2 violet phoenix hairpins in his pouch. They belonged to Nun Jinggang in the past. Since she could control them, she naturally had a method to refine them. Therefore, he turned around and found 2 jade slips on Nun Jinggang's body. As expected, the jade slip contained the method to refine the violet phoenix hairpins. Of course, this jade slip was something from the incense cult. Other than the violet phoenix hairpins, there was also the Sangarama plate that he had just obtained. Even the small seal, the devil exorcism seal, had a method to refine them. However, Zhang Xiaohua had been in a hurry these past few days. Moreover, he was worried that the incense cult's artifact would emit a unique aura if he refined it. Therefore, he didn't refine it. After all, the current situation was somewhat dangerous, and it was better to avoid trouble first. At the back of the jade slip, there were a few simple pill recipes. They weren't for healing. Zhang Xiaohua roughly looked at them and guessed that they should be classified as poison or confusion. The herbs used were also very strange and were quite similar to the ones he had obtained in the Ghost Valley. However, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't interested in them. With a wave of his hand, he kept the jade slip into his pouch. Then, Zhang Xiaohua took out another jade slip. This jade slip was also from Nun Jinggang. However, at this time, when Zhang Xiaohua immersed his divine sense into it and finished reading the contents, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. I was wondering why Nun Jinggang's divine sense was so weak and could be divided into 3 parts. Each part could be controlled individually and could even block my flying sword. As for Jinggang Shirtai, she was able to extend her divine sense from afar and entangle my great wisdom sword as if it had a shape. It turns out that Zhuangxiang cult has such a miraculous technique that can split one's divine sense into small divine senses. Furthermore, this divine sense can actually leave the body and have other wonderful uses. Compared to the divine sense imprint in God's guide, each has its own merits. However, this divine sense manipulation technique can infinitely find divine sense. If this technique is cultivated to the realm of great success, it can actually control several types of magic tools and attack at the same time. In the Battle of the Immortal Tao, this is an extremely powerful divine ability. After Zhang Xiaohua understood the importance of magic tools in the Battle of the Immortal Tao, he was extremely sensitive to the effects of this technique. In his battle with Nun Jinggang, in the end, because he was distracted to control Chasing Dream, he couldn't use the flying technique at the same time. His body paused for a moment, but it was this moment that almost caused him to be consigned to eternal damnation and suffer the same fate as Nun Jinggang. If he had learned this divine sense manipulation technique earlier, with one divine sense controlling the flying sword and the other controlling the dragon binding ring, wouldn't he be able to easily retreat? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes unconsciously lit up. 10,000 swords shooting at the same time was of course the highest realm of the sword of the world. Right now, he was only able to split one into 4. If he mastered the divine sense manipulation technique, then would he be able to use one strand of divine sense to control the flying sword? Would this flying sword be able to split into 4? If he could split many strands of divine sense, wouldn't each strand of divine sense be able to control one flying sword? Splitting one into 4? The more Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. He knew the power of flying swords. Now that he lacked offensive magic tools, the more he could control these flying swords, the more powerful their attacks would be. This divine sense manipulation technique was tailor-made for him. Unfortunately, this divine sense manipulation technique only split and controlled divine sense, but it didn't have a way to train divine sense. This made Zhang Xiaohua a little depressed. Although God's guidance could strengthen divine sense and cultivate the heart of herbalism, Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation of God's guidance seemed to have reached a bottleneck. Although he had been working hard, there hadn't been any obvious progress. The expansion of his divine sense was only due to the increase in his cultivation level. But why is Nun Jingyi's divine sense so strong? Could it be that it isn't due to this divine sense manipulation technique? Zhang Xiaohua thought gloomily. Although it was just a thought, Zhang Xiaohua still made a hand seal and entered the alchemy room he had just found. Then, he immersed his divine sense into the jade slip and read the divine will cultivation method in detail. Then, he began to cultivate. The day passed quickly. When the sun was setting, Zhang Xiaohua came out of the alchemy room. Just as he was about to fly into the sky, he suddenly slapped his forehead and landed on the ground. I have already obtained the 18 pill furnaces and investigated the spies of the various sections. What else do I need to do? Meng is currently in seclusion, and I don't know if she has come out yet. If I return to Lingering Fragrance Peak, I won't be able to see Meng. Even Nun Jinggang's matter will implicate me. Rather than attracting Nun Jingyi's attention in Emotian Palace, why don't I take a stroll around the Spreading Fragrance sect and wait for Nun Jingyi's attention to the Tenryu sect before returning to gather information on the spies? Furthermore, this is already 9 Radiance Peak. I remember that the Tenryu sect disciple mentioned that there is a strange place in the Jade Mine under 9 Radiance Peak. It might be a passageway that leads to the outside of the Spreading Fragrance sect. Why don't I go down and take a look? It would be best if there is a passageway there. If there isn't, I can at least get some good jade stones. It's worth it. With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua concealed herself and flew into the depths of 9 Radiance Peak. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not know where the entrance to the mineral vein was, it was dusk now. Teams of Shuyu Hall disciples were returning from the mineral vein. As long as they went in the opposite direction, it would be easy to find it. Sure enough, it didn't take long for them to find a heavily guarded place. Indeed, this place was not a cave as Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. Instead, it was a gorgeous courtyard at the foot of the mountain. Could it be that I made a mistake? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was thinking, she saw the door of the inner courtyard open. A pair of exhausted Shuyu Hall disciples filed out. Their attire was different from what Zhang Xiaohua had seen earlier. It was coarse and dusty. 4. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.